So this Terry, ready to go? Good. This special meeting of the Board of Education for March 21st, 2023 is called to order. Purpose of tonight's meeting is to vote on this year's integrated grant application after a presentation and public comment. All materials have been posted on the PPS website under the Board of Meetings tab. The meeting is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on Channel 28, and it'll be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks, and you can check the district website for replay times. First, we would like to acknowledge Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. March is Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month, and tonight we have a resolution to recognize this month in public schools. Superintendent Guerrero.
Thank you, Chair Scott. Good evening, directors, to our staff and audience. In PPS Reimagined, our adopted vision, it explicitly calls out mindful, inclusive practices that support the continuum of students with disabilities as one of our system shifts. One of the ways that we support our students have developmental disabilities is through our work with our families, with our family engagement efforts. So here tonight to speak on how we are engaging in that work. See us again, Noelle Sisk, our Special Education Family Engagement Specialist. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Superintendent and Chair Scott. Different chair this time. And board. This is my first time being in person since before COVID, correct? The last two proclamations, right. I think, were online, so this is the first one that feels normal again. So thank you for having me. I am a parent of a daughter with an intellectual and developmental disability who is graduating this year from Grant. I'll cry.
Same here. Yeah.
It hits you when you don't think it's going to hit you. But I am a family engagement specialist for PPS. My colleague and I cover the whole district, so all families who experience have a child experiencing disability. Some of the things that we have been doing to recognize this kind of system shift with the strategic plan is to engage families and make sure that they know how to support their child through the IEP process, how to engage school and create welcoming communities, and how to break down ableism within the school system currently. And that is not on the special education families or the special education staff, it's in conjunction with, but it is on the school community in a whole, including general education. My colleague and I have talked to about 70 students. We've been doing student class interviews over the last month and a half, and we are about to do our 11th this Tuesday. And I would say that the main theme that comes out of those classes, and about 35 of them were students who experience intellectual and developmental disabilities, was that they want to feel like they belong in their school community, that they want to be seen as a student and as a human and not as a person with just a disability. And that was from their engagement with their peers and their engagement with their teachers. And so I think together we are definitely making that system shift, but we can't change what we can't acknowledge. Mm-hmm. And so I think this awareness proclamation is so key in making sure that our schools are safe, welcoming, and have high expectations for these students who are impacted by intellectual and developmental disability. Thank you so much for keeping that and for considering that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here tonight. Do we have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6683?
So moved.
Okay. Director Green moves, and I'm going to give Director to pass the second.
Thank you.
Everybody.
And is there any board discussion?
I just want to thank you for being here and say that for me, I'm going to be paying close attention in our budget process to our school psychologists. And I know we've done a good job of building up their ranks, and that the proposal coming before us is like the way you have been told is going to increase their ranks, but still to really look at what their load is as far as working with families, trying to get IEPs, navigating with IEPs, and really figure out if we've got what we need in terms of supporting those families and those processes.
For sure, I agree. And making sure that those tiered supports from tier 1, 2, and 3 are really strong so that schools and families don't think special education is the only support. And as you know, the percentile of eligible students in PPS is much higher than the national average. And so I think a lot of that, these changes in inclusive education and strengthening the ability for our general education rooms to support all students and strengthening through that through coaching, through all those things will really help to balance that out.
I want to just thank you for being here also and sharing your lived experience and also
That's
your
20
findings. Yeah, no, I really, it's meaningful. And also just for sharing that finding that people, the kids that you're talking to want to be seen as whole people
Yeah.
first and want to belong, and just how strong of a feeling that is for, especially for teenagers. I really appreciate you bringing that
Absolutely.
to the fore.
And those listening sections are in order to inform the strategic plan going forward. So all of that data from I think when we're done, close to 80 students. And that's from students with, in the ISC, in the CD programs, in the SES programs, at Pioneer, and at our community transition program that serves 18 to 21. And so all of that data will be submitted in order to inform practices, and because they're the one experiencing the education, they're the one experiencing our system. So we did family sessions as well, but hearing from the students was the most powerful thing that my colleague and I have done in a long time. And sharing that storytelling, I wish everyone could have been in that room.
Yeah, we should also always listen to the end users, and I know agents do that really well, but
Yeah,
sometimes public agencies don't, so I appreciate it.
remembering there are why. Thank you.
Great to be able to vote on this on World Down Syndrome Day.
I know, sorry, I meant to say that, I'm nervous.
Are you wearing mismatched socks?
I'm not today. Where am I? But yes, so today is World Down Syndrome Awareness Day. And so, because there's a copy of three copies of the 21st chromosome, and it looks like a mismatched sock. So that's where that comes from, mismatched socks. So, I know, I'll do better next year.
Any other board? Yeah.
I was just gonna add, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
I think I met you 6 years ago.
I know.
Sitting at Pioneer.
Yes, we were.
And I know that you have, you and other staff really elevate our students' voices, and it gives them power. Because of that, I feel like they hang in there and are getting across the finish line, like your daughter. So thank you for everything you do, and I also just a general thank you to all the staff who, especially during COVID, it wasn't easy. It was a more challenging environment, and I think I'm excited about where we're heading. But
Same.
I appreciate you and other staff always elevating and empowering our students.
Thank you.
We know can do amazing things. So.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for those comments. Do we have any public comment, Kara? All right. Without further ado, the board will now vote. Resolution 6683, resolution to recognize March 2023 as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Student Representative May.
Yes.
Any abstentions? Resolution 6683 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative May voting yes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up is a resolution to approve the integrated grant application. So we are going to be approving tonight, hopefully, the integrated grant application before it is submitted to the Department of Education by the end of the month. Last week, we had an opportunity to do a deep dive into the application along with members of our Community Budget Review Committee, who are also, many of them are here tonight. Thank you for joining us again. Several staff were also on hand to answer questions, and I really appreciated the time that folks spent on that. Tonight, staff will again provide a brief overview of the application, and then we're going to have an opportunity to hear some feedback from the CBRC, and we also have some public comment tonight on this as well. Superintendent Guerrero, anything to add?
Only to echo the appreciation for the collective conversation between board, staff, CBRC members. Staff can to answer questions there. So I hope to get into a similar dialogue this evening. I'll turn it over to our chief of staff to walk us through some highlights.
Thank you, Superintendent. So again, you've all seen this deck last week, so we won't spend too much on any one slide. But as you know, a year ago, ODE released Aligning for Student Success, integrated guidance for 6 ODE initiatives that integrate 6 programs that PPS is responsible for administering. We have been referring to this initiative internally as ODE's Integrated Grant and Guidance, or IGG. So that's how you'll hear it. And as we shared, it's going to be due in a few weeks on March 31st. And so, as you all know, we're guided by, we have a destination, we have a roadmap, and we have a compass that guide all of all aspects of what we do and how we do it. And so it is our effort here at the central office to align all of our investments towards our strategic plan. Again, our vision, our roadmap, and our destination. So as you can see here, our attempt is to bring alignment around all these different investment areas, investments that we get from both the federal government and local and state. And so to that end, this is where it's aligned to the integrated grants plan, because what the state has asked to school districts to do is to integrate the 6 different programs that they fund into one. And so for the next school year, last week, PPS plans to receive $51.9 million. That represents about 2.8% of our overall budget, and it is part of our special revenue. So again, when you think about the Portland Public Schools budget, you think about it in 4 different categories: the general fund, which is about 42%, special revenue at about 11.8%, our capital projects and debt at 40%, and internal service at 0.4%. And so today, again, we're talking about 2.8 of that special revenue. And so, as we shared with you last week, the state has allocated $52 million, a little bit under $52 million for the 23-24 school year. And that is broken down here into these major buckets, with $36 million of that being in the student investment account, also known as the SIA, and $13 million coming out of high school student success, or Measure 98. So while the integrated grants funds make up about 1/6 of the special revenue buckets, these grant investments deepen and expand our strategic plan work to disrupt inequities, foster inclusive partnerships and collaboration, and provide inclusive and differentiated learning opportunities. Our integrated grants plan aligns investments, activities, and specific strategies from our strategic plan, as you can see it here outlined. These investments are highly interrelated, and together they advance our commitment to rigorous, high-quality, inclusive academic learning that disrupts racial inequities. And so, as we shared, here is a summary of some of the direct investments that are going to PPS schools next year under this integrated grants plan. The integrated grants plan invests in local students and school-based on need, with an emphasis on improving cultural responsive, site-based learning experiences. Our investments align with key priorities identified in our needs assessment, priorities that were also expressed by our community. For example, it's imperative that we focus on an improved classroom experience. We maintain classroom sizes beyond what we would have been able to do with general funds, and having our youngest learners, our kindergarten students in our Title I schools, continue to benefit from education assistance. We're also prioritizing personalized learning with differentiated and flexible experiences that increase access to arts, interest-based electives, self-directed learning, and engagement in what our students deserve. So this proposal maintains our educational arts pathways and our others' access to rich interest-based electives and learning opportunities. This includes career-related programs, emphasize real-world hands-on learning, and also continued investments in advanced coursework, especially for our students of color. This grant application also prioritized strong multi-system systems of supports, including wraparound social, emotional, mental, and behavioral health services, including 46.5 social workers across our schools. The racial our investments, as I shared, include restorative justice advocates who build and strengthen community and to repair harm as part of our work to reorient discipline. Again, we have social workers, college coordinators, attendance coaches, along with tier academic and social emotional supports. And lastly, we also continue our partnerships with our racial equity and social justice partners to support particularly our students of color. All of these proposed investments are coupled with our equity-centered, research-based, and data-informed continuous improvement process across schools to address our core need, which is to eliminate the educational opportunity and outcome gaps for our students of color. And again, you all have the budget and the narrative that you received for last week's meeting, and that is what we will be submitting to the state of Oregon. With that, I will turn it over to you all.
Great. So we're going to open it up for questions, but actually, and we also do have some public comment. I think before we do that, I would like to ask if there's any comment from our CBRC members on the integrated grant application. Then we'll do public comment, and then we'll open it up for board, any further questions or conversations. So happy to start with CBRC, and I'm sorry, given the space of this room, I would have loved to have you all at the table. So actually, if there are chairs and you all want to come up, that's fine. But we definitely have presenter and public comment, or you can talk from back there if you're more comfortable. So whichever is better for you. Go ahead.
I think one point that I would like to get a little clarity on is with all of the FTE in the SIA, how was the FTE distributed to schools? How was that goal of closing educational and opportunity and outcome gaps for our students of color? That's not clear.
Thank you. Well, so again, I think the question, how are FTE allocated to schools, and particularly with a focus on our equity goals?
High school success in particular.
Sorry. I can try and answer that question. What is the question about?
All of the FTE, I think it's slide 9, that's listed under SIA and also the high school success. How were those distributed to schools based on our equity goals?
Yeah, so overarchingly, which I find extremely beneficial in regards to how we work with staff, is that we do utilize an equity formula. And so there's no difference here in regards to the staffing for these particular type of FTE. When you look at, and Dr. Adams can talk more a little bit in terms of what that formula is, but poverty is a big piece. CSI, TSI comes into play, those level of schools that are designated under that designation. And so that accounts for historically underrepresented students and those particular types of things. So even though they're potentially listed under specific, budgets, our allocation method generally doesn't change.
So the improved class sizes would have been the 554.9 would have been determined.
Right.
And the instructional coaches?
Instructional coaches, and I'll let Dr. Armstrong talk.
Sure, the instructional coaches, one per site for all of our elementary, middle schools, and then our high schools already had a 0.5 allocation that continues. And then the only thing that I will say is that some sites who had special designation, CSI or TSI, already had an allocation for an instructional coach. And so it was adding to all of the schools so that every single one of our sites could have an instructional coach that was focused on the instructional priorities.
And so the CSI and TSI, did they lose FTE in instructional coaching?
No.
But they didn't gain any?
It's a good question. We do have an equity-centered staffing distribution model. The rules, the formulas, the caseloads, those are all articulated in our core programming guide. In most cases, because this doesn't represent all the additional staff, it's supplementing where we saw incomplete pathways, for example, in arts. Those have been focused in our underserved schools. Coaches were augmenting so that every school would have the benefit of a full-time one. Depending on a school's designation, CSI, TSI, and there's been shifts there and refresh. That's afforded historically, or at least since federal designations were distributed. A lot of additional staffing. You find those individually listed in our annual staffing or in our budget book. So we've been pretty transparent about where are those staff. And so we've tried to focus, I think, more than most other districts on direct services to students, and most of that is into programming and staffing in our schools with the greatest needs.
I'll also say this too, is that we also had 15 schools that exited CSI.
Right.
And know that we did not just pull resources, but we did bridge there, because we do realize how important this was. So I just want to make mention 15 schools exited. It's a really good thing, right? But also make mention that there was a bridge in terms of resources, because we know how important it is not to just pull everything out, but we wanted to make sure there was a bridge here in this resource.
Does that get at your questions?
I think so. I think I'm just gonna be unsatisfied with instructional coaches being distributed equally instead of equitably, because as we know, our schools have achievement gaps. And I'm curious about the judgment of putting one instructional coach in every building. If the building may have 90% of their students meeting for proficiency, and another school may have 90% not. Seems like where there are higher needs, with lots of, speaking from experience as a classroom teacher, with language barriers, other trauma experiences, especially post-pandemic. We know that wasn't experienced equitably or equally across our community, that we need to respond to the needs more equitably, to coach teachers who have students that have a greater need for really highly skilled teachers. And so I don't understand putting one instructional coach in a building, especially with an SIA grant that is supposed to be targeted.
Yeah.
So
We have some,
it's
some
important
thoughts.
to note that there are a number of schools that have more than one. When we talked about the instructional coach allocation, that did not speak to the additional instructional support that already existed in the school. We were just responding to this one layer of question. But what we're trying to express is that the CSI and TSI schools average higher FTE in support FTE for instruction, for social emotional learning, and other areas above all of our other schools. And we have some data that could demonstrate that as well for you.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Yeah, so just want to make sure the board recalls we presented on this previously. You'll hear a little bit more in the next presentation with the ARS team, but our India schools average up to a half dozen additional. The reason why I believed it was important for every school to have the benefit of an instructional coach is to give that additional capacity at the school site level, because every teacher is learning to integrate a newly adopted curriculum, and in order to support planning and sense making of those new lessons, we were being responsive to what we heard school leaders expressing. And so that's just one element. We're not talking about 20 acceleration specialists that have been deployed out to deal to help address the learning needs of India's students in identified schools, and that's a specifically targeted effort for Black and Native students in particular. And so those are being carefully case managed. Not all schools have those. We were very clear that we're going to deploy them with specifically assigned students as well.
So that's really more of an investment in the instructional effectiveness in every single school, as opposed to direct student supports, right?
Okay. Additional questions or comments from the CBRC?
So I have a few questions here.
Can I ask you to speak up, just so, sorry, there, Captain.
Yeah, this room does not
Yeah,
have
and I
any
need some water too, so
If everybody would speak up, it would be helpful.
maybe somebody can read it. I can forward it to somebody and maybe they can read it for me.
Yeah, or, yeah, actually, if you want to step up, we got a couple seats up here.
Can you move up to, move up to the table right here?
It's just like the acoustics in the room are bad, so it's.
Windows for
Use my teacher voice.
Well, and is this from your letter? Because I was gonna ask a couple of those questions as well if you weren't here, but since you're here, you want me to go ahead or do you want to go ahead and do it? Okay, make sure I'm getting them right. I think one of the questions was around the line item for culturally responsive and sustaining professional development. That was in a couple of different places and noting that there was $270,000 allocated for that, and then sort of a question of whether that was sufficient or whether there should be more. I'll turn that over to the superintendent. The question I had was maybe similar to the instructional spending. Was that all of the funding in the district for that, or was that only the integrated grant portion of that funding, and there may be other?
Yeah, so first we'll recognize that there is a need to make sure that all of our conversations put an explicit attention to the diverse learners we serve. And so part of that pedagogy is to be making sure that we're culturally responsive. So hopefully all of the instructional coaching that happens, being mindful about that. We want to make sure that we're differentiating the instructional material to the audience that we serve as well. And so, we get at that in a variety of ways. I'm going to turn it over to our chief academic officer, but part of our instructional framework talks about the need for cultural responsiveness. So we're making sure our diverse learners are accessing content as well as having their needs met. But, so I think the question is specific about is that all we're spending? But it's not all the attention we're putting on it.
Right, absolutely. I would say that through the work, through our instructional framework, there's a piece on there about culturally affirming and also an element on relationships. And so when we think of all of the work that we're engaging our teachers in, the professional learning investment for our people, but then also giving them the opportunity to go to other learnings outside, all with the theme of culturally relevant and responsive. I think it fits within our framework when we talk about the roadmap to educational equity, and a key part of that being teacher professional learning. So that specific dollar amount doesn't, when I think of what we're investing in teacher professional learning and knowing that culturally responsive practice is at the heart of that, I would say that number is probably times 5.
We'll go through some more of these. We talked about this being a two-step process because of OD's rules, so we have to approve this now before the end of March, but we still have a budget conversation to go through. I would love to see this question and maybe some of the others, and even the one we just talked about instructional specialists being added to our budget Q&A, so that sort of the question, like what are we doing in the classroom around that? How much are we spending on, culturally responsive and sustaining, so we can get that fuller answer. And then as a budget conversation, we can talk about whether we want to, again, reallocate or prioritize some additional funds.
I have a question. So when we are talking about setting this or voting on this, and we come back with a budget allocation conversation, are we adjusting this here as well, or is that the different budget bucket or pie that we're using from?
We would, so this portion, it's best to think about it as fixed. So then we would then think about the other 98% of the budget.
Right.
And so if we then come back, when we come back with the superintendent's proposed budget, we have our conversations and it's like, you know what, we really should be doubling down on instructional coaches. So instead of 1, make it 2 or whatever it may be, then we would be assessing general fund and those, which is the bulk of our funding, to make those adjustments.
Okay, but so we wouldn't be adjusting after this vote today. We would not be adjusting anything in this proposal, grant proposal.
So the only opportunity is when we get the grants from ODE. So ODE is still going to be finalizing the grant documents, and that when they finalize that, this happened 2 years ago. It was like my first spring here. We actually received additional funding. So in that case, 2 years ago in August, we received $5 million more of SIA. And so we won't know what the final fixed amount is. Hopefully it's not less. Hopefully it's only more until ODE provides our grant agreements.
But as far as the strategies that we're using, this is a
that's-
commitment that we're making when
I
we
think
submit
that's-
this to the state.
100. I think that's the conversation is around reaffirming the strategies that the district's using to support getting to our needs or supporting our student outcomes. But leveraging the general fund is where the biggest piece is really going to
So
affect.
I actually didn't realize that, and so I'm going to make a statement for the record that has nothing to do with us because I know we're not doing this, but that's actually, I thought what we were doing was passing something that was a plan. This is how we plan to spend the money, but that plan could be adjusted as we went forward as a district. And I will just say on the record, if ODE is saying what you submit to us now is what we're going to review and approve and thus can't change, and the fact that they're asking for that prior to school districts statewide adopting a budget is very problematic. And I would be happy to send a letter to ODE expressing my frustration, because that's bad budgeting and it's bad policy making, and the state should get their act together. I was about to say something different. They should get their act together and link up these processes. It's not that hard to do.
Yeah.
Leslie,
Yeah.
who manages our state federal programming, is there anything you want to add regarding this integrated planning process? Why don't you stand up?
I
So
just would like to thank you for that statement. And I would, anyone who would like to also send a letter, because that does make it problematic, as you're saying, we're having conversations in not logical order. And we understand the urgency and the process that the state needs to go through to evaluate, approve, and execute grant agreements in a time-sensitive way, so that we then have an operating budget and a grant agreement. However, I think a lot of this comes from the legislation that was written with SIA, and so maybe there needs to be a reevaluation of amending some of the legislation that is dictating this. So thank you.
Question. So in this proposal, is there a way we can make some of the things more ambiguous so we can have that flexibility of changing some things a little bit later on? Can we?
So that primarily falls under the additional tiered planning. And I have the benefit of having the digital version of the several hundred pages that was printed for the board last week. And that's where we can document if there is additional funding. Are there areas that we can see or discuss adding or providing additional funding?
So the additional tier planning section, how much do we have in there? Because I'm assuming that's anything that's above what we're saying.
Correct. It's about $28 million worth of activities that we have slated. In case additional funding comes in, there's additional initiatives we could support.
Furthermore, just to continue with Mr. Cruz's comments, makes a recommendation to expand teacher professional development and support to engage families by allocating more funds towards Section 17 IDB3 and having that fall under the Center for Black Student Excellence in.
So Chair Scott, I just want to make sure for just like context here, the 270 that was referenced earlier and the one that you just mentioned, that's dollars allocated through the Measure 98 high school student success, right? So again, as we think about the different budgets or different buckets of money create the whole, right? So we do have an extensive PD budget, right? And as we think about and as you realize, like when you look at our ESSER investments, right, we're using one-time dollars for PD in there. So we're mindful of trying to do, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there. So the 270 particularly is geared towards high school Measure 98.
And I think providing some, as part of our budget Q&A, a little bit more of that. Amy, was this about this specifically, or because I wanted to finish with Corona?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So then in addition, notes that there's a little over $4 million going towards REA2, which is cultivating a culture of racial equity and care, strategic initiatives, instructional services, and then some questions around that. How does this help the district achieve the board's goals, and could this be part of the professional development that teachers are asking for?
Which line item?
So this was the $4 million for cultivating a RE-A2, cultivating a culture of racial equity and care.
It's like the second paragraph from the bottom. Page 2.
That's in the letter. I think
Oh,
Jonathan was asking where in the.
I see where in line
of
up,
the
okay.
IGG dollars to strategic planning. It's the first one on the top is $4,188,752.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess what I don't know
Here, let me.
what documents everyone
Yeah,
is
no, so I
referring to, but we have 4 theme areas. Regardless of revenue stream, staff has spent a few months talking about, here's an outline of activity, you know, for our strategic plan that we're hoping for the opportunity to continue advancing, right? We're not, you know, and I think the question is, you know, what are some of the specific strategies or tactics or activities or programs we're trying to invest in those areas? I haven't heard anybody suggest, and I think we should be doing this specific thing, and everything's a trade-off as well. But in this area, you know, it's in this block area for things like supporting the work of Pacific partners, for example, that can our schools. Do you want to talk a little bit about what are the specific line items in that category?
Yes, in one of the things, if we look at the tiered, the IGG integrated budget, some of those items would be the partners, our ResJ partners, which is approximately 1.7 million. And then that would also include CBO allocations, charter school allocations. We have investments for student affinity groups, leadership opportunities for students of color.
And this is out of the $4 million we're talking about.
So yeah, so
I guess it's hard.
underlying.
So I guess when I see the question as far as how does this achieve our board goals, I look at our board goals downstairs when it's talking about 3rd grade reading, 5th grade math. I guess that's what I'm looking for, that correlation. You know, because that's the board goals, not the strategic plan.
But just to add, the strategic plan is in pursuit.
Well, no. I get that percent, but the question was how do it connect to the board goals? So I get that part, 100%. But I'm trying to make the connection with the question of how the alignment of how it goes with our board goals with 3rd grade reading, 5th grade math. That's all I'm just saying. I understand the strategic plan gets us there, but this question here is specifically. So I guess what I'm kind of here, if you're talking about 1.7 million for our ResJ partners, I'm thinking of those 3rd grade. I mean, those partners coming in helping 3rd grade reading, you know, or 5th grade math tutors or something. That's what I'm kind of looking for, that alignment.
Like a through line.
Yeah, so if I may, I think, and this is, I'll reference this, an extensive document that tries to map how these investments are aligned to the overall strategic plan. So to your answer, to your point specifically, the investments that we're making are around culturally specific family engagement, wraparound services, leadership development and mentoring, especially for our middle school and our high school students, embedded learning and enrichment, whether that's after school or into the summer. And the last one is around positive cultural identity development and student advocacy. So the part of the work that we're trying to do is make that connection, particularly for our students of color, through our nonprofit partners, right? Trying to target. So do we have a organization that is looking at reading as a target?
3rd grade.
3rd grade reading. I would say I'm looking at Black Parent Initiative, who's thinking about how they're engaging, families to be the child's first teacher, right? And so while I don't have a direct correlation between because as I've learned from our educators, it's multiple things, inputs that create the outputs and the outcomes, right? And so I would say yes, and right. And so one of the things that we're actively working towards is making even stronger connections between the inputs that we're making around culturally specific organizations, for example, to the outcome, right? So what is the stronger connection? So I think that's the work of Dr. Adams, that's the work of Dr. Armstrong, and Daniel Ledesma, our res data firm. So really working towards addressing that finite question, right? Because I hear from last week, what's the ROI, right? What's the ROI? So I hear that, and so I think that's the mission of some of our team.
Yeah, and one of our specific strategies at the last couple of partner meetings that we had with the culturally specific organizations was to share out about the instructional framework and some of the moves that we were making in the Office of Teaching and Learning and Office of School Support or School Performance, as well as the developmental continuum and their partnership and realizing that project through to completion, which is near its finalization stage. But just having those conversations on what it means for partners to be leaning into our work as described in the instructional framework.
So what I'm hearing, I'm just making sure I'm clear. So as we're talking to our resident partners, around the strategic plan, getting to our board goals, we're having those conversations saying this is where we want to get to, and we are asking them to come out with outcomes for money that we give them to get us to those goals or those outcomes. So that's what we're doing.
Yes.
So we should be able to at some point see, I don't know, I'm gonna say a document or see their outcomes of, okay, if BPI is going to be looking at how to, as Jonathan example, BPI is going to be teaching about how the parents become their first teachers. BPI should be able to have something for us that shows how they're going to accomplish that.
Oh, or is that?
I think it answered. Sorry.
It's going to be a mix of activities, because in some cases at one school with one partner, they're mentoring 12 African American boys. In another school, you might have an organization that's running affinity groups. In another school, you might have, so the hope is that, the combination of all these activities, set an environment, setting the stage for readiness to learn, for student efficacy, for individual agency, all of those things. They're not the core strategy. I mean, that's happening in the classroom ideally. And then we have our tier 2 and 3 approaches, but all of our investments hopefully are adding to the equation and the support towards student success, certainly.
So, I'm sorry. So I hear what you're saying. So I just want to make sure that when we are having our partners or whoever we're going to be giving money to, there is going to be an outcome that we're going to be expecting from them, and then we're going to make sure that that is happening.
So what I'm hearing you're asking for is both quantitative and qualitative data.
Sure.
So I need to know from numerically how many people are you serving,
Sure.
and then the data behind that, and then that's the quantitative, and then the qualitative, which is more narrative, which
Sure.
is going to tell me about the stories, because you can't, how do you talk about the impact of just having a black man in the room? But you got to have those, and I want to know how we're measuring, because if I give you $1, I want to know what did I get for that $1.
Sure. I'll let Dr. Adams speak to this.
Part of the things we'll be looking at are things that lead to increased student achievement, right? We may have a culturally specific partner, and their work with mentoring might lead to increases in student attendance. We know we need students to be in their seats for them to have increased academic achievement. We might look at a partner and their mentoring and think about outcomes on behavior and discipline referrals for students. Again, we know when students are in the discipline process, the referral process, they're not in the class with their teacher and they're not receiving instruction. We believe if those things improve, we should see improvement in student outcomes and performance.
Are you receiving those outcomes from partners?
Well, we have the referral data and we have the attendance data. What partners help us understand is who they're serving, how often they're serving them, what the different and what the intensities and whether those are students and families. But we have a quarterly meeting where the superintendent, myself, and other members of the leadership team meet with the ResJ partners. We spent a lot of time so far this year. We've had 2 meetings with them, orienting them to the adopted board goals, expressing very clearly that these are where we're headed and where we need their help and what we need their help in improving. And then, as Dr. Armstrong mentioned, now unpacking some of the other pieces of the initiatives so they can find their way and their entry points if they are not already aware of those.
So you just said that you measured that data to connect to the board goals, but you don't receive the data from
That's not what I said, Mr. Combs. What I said is, our partners don't have referral data. Those are our data. What our partners help us understand is Jonathan, Liz, and Guadalupe are receiving services from BPI. And because of that, we can then look at outcome data based on what they're working on to understand if they're having a positive impact on student outcomes.
It's the right question that Director Hollins is asking. We want to know that for every one of our dollars, our investments, our time and effort, that we have some ability to correlate quantifiable data. And, part of our mission is to build not just a balanced assessment system, but an ability to draw and filter and disaggregate that data anytime we have a question like that. And, for something that didn't exist, that's what we've been building over time. Now, part of the reason we're marinating our partners and sort of where we're headed with everybody being able to speak to their impact towards our goals is, we have sort of this multi-year RFP, and part of our thinking is how do we make explicitly clear that if you're looking for an investment or to do business with PPS, your work's going to have to be able to speak to one of these board goal areas. And here's the way that we're going to progress monitor towards that. So I just want to assure you we are well aware and have the same desire to make sure that we're able to do that with our data systems.
So I just want to put a fine point on this and ask whether these are going to be directly reflected in our new round of contracting, because we've been fine tuning our contracts with our ResJ partners for the last several years in terms of performance metrics that we can monitor so that we can have some sense of whether they're contributing to what we're looking for. And now we're even more pointed about it because we're trying to directly correlate them with our board goals. So is that going to be specifically reflected in the way that the contracts are written moving forward?
I think because we've learned a lot through these partnerships, we want to refine that RFP to capture sort of what our goals are. And, we've been in a little stronger position capacity-wise on pulling data and whatnot on our end. So that's the intent.
Because I think that's a really critical question for us going into the budget process. Because we're not going to really have a sense of the effectiveness of individual grantees unless we know that we have a template that creates clear expectations for them.
Right. So maybe the question really is to Doug here for the next round of discussion is, do you have all the capacity you need to be able to do that kind of work?
Oh, if you're going to give me some FTE, I'm never going to say no. What I would offer, since Ms. Ledesma is not here, is we could probably reshare with the board the ResJ Partner Investment Strategy document. That contains all the research around the five different ResJ activities and what some intended outcomes could be from each of the activities that we then can hold partners accountable for.
Okay, that'd be great.
And I want to make sure I'm not just talking about just the ResJ partner piece too. I'm talking about the whole $4 million. It should be along those lines. I don't want to just single out the ResJ partners, but everything that's coming out with that $4 million pieces.
Okay, we've got some additional questions. I
Michelle had
want
one, and
to,
then
but I want to finish up because we just a couple.
Chair, if you don't mind, the last portion of my letter, we can.
That's exactly what he's looking at.
You can table it.
I think table that. But if we can jump back to the first portion of the 13 million that's going towards the integrated instructional frameworks. So I just wanted you guys to have a framework of why I'm asking this question. So I'm asking this question as over 10-year experienced teacher who has experience in the classroom, who has raised achievement. So now, from a lens who's a parent who has children in the district right now that's receiving not good instruction. So now, from a lens of as a business owner, now that I hire people and I'm looking at resumes of people who have been graduated from PPS, now I'm seeing the end result. So these are all the different angles.
Wow.
So as a business owner, when I look at $13 million being spent to try to raise achievement or just for an initiative, that is alarming to me. So as a classroom teacher and also a former union member, I'm looking, that's alarming to me, because if I have experience in the classroom and I know what to do and I know how to raise achievement, I'm like, okay, invest in what I'm doing. Where is this $13 million going? So I just want you to have an understanding of the framework of why I'm asking this particular question.
So I'm going to ask, and similar to what I suggested before, that as part of our budget process, which CBRC is going to continue to be involved in, that we get an answer to that specific question about breaking down, this $13 million. I will say that in my experience, sometimes doing public budgeting for a long time, sometimes the dollars look very large, particularly people who run business, but sort of not grasping necessarily the size of the organization we're talking about, right? Thousands of employees and all those things. Not saying that I don't know what's in this $13.525 million, and I think we need to break it down, but I think that'll be helpful for all of us as we go into the budget conversation, is to get some more of that detail about exactly what this is doing. Because I think the question you're asking is good. You're saying if we're spending over $13.5 million, how do I know that's money well spent? And I think it's on the superintendent's team to come back to us and say, here's how we know it's money well spent, right? Because that's, I'm going to presume, what's happening in terms of all of these budget conversations. But I want to, if it's okay with everybody, because I don't think we're going to answer that question tonight, but I don't want to lose that question as part of our overall budget process. Does that work? Mr. Cruz.
You're the chair.
Yes, but I'm just asking for your feedback on that approach.
I mean, if that's the process that is best, how you want to run this meeting, I mean, you have control. So.
No, I think it's more of, is that information available now? Do we have that information available? What are we spending the $13.5 million on? If it's available now, it would be nice to have that information before we vote on it. But if we don't, then we just have to vote according to how many people feel it's okay with the information that they have.
So, Chair Scott, do you have this information already? And I just wanted to make sure I confirm with my colleagues. So, if you look at your proposed activity budget sheet, which has an extensive number of ID numbers, strategy numbers there, you can look at, so how are we spending those $14 million? Anything that is IDB 1, 2, 3, and 4. IDB 1, 2, 3, and 4.
That's the thing we got last week.
And which of the, I'm sorry, I'm on board books.
Me too. I don't have it in front of me.
It's the budget book. It's the budget line.
23, 20.
Is it the integrated plan?
So it's ID.
It's not in the board book.
It's not in the board.
Oh, it's not.
It was supplemental information. We were
These are
printed
the
out
days
last week.
printed out last week. Yeah.
They just print out something observable.
You mean the one that's in
Integrated
my right now?
grant budget plan,
That
it is
one.
the very first column, anything
they
that
read
says
everything
ID
before bed.
1,
I have been.
You have it in, you do have it in your.
No, the thing I said is.
Oh, it is in board book.
Hold on,
It is.
everybody.
It is in
stop
your board
talking.
book.
Okay.
Let Jonathan and staff talk. Thank you. Where is it?
It is in your in there as the integrated plan and budget PDF. So once you go on there, you go on there.
Documents.
You're looking at starting at page, I don't know what.
But it doesn't have the dollar amounts.
Alternately.
Yes, it does. After starting on page 3.
Oh, yeah, okay, got you.
And so again, IDB 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Does the public have access to that? Sorry, shout out.
You do.
It's
posted.
in board book.
On the IDB
It's posted in two different formats. One is alternative view and one is regular where you can see it all the way across.
I'm not finding it.
So it's attachment 2.
The one that's titled Integrated Plan and Budget.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play.
Jonathan, what I was, and I may not have said it very well. I know we sort of have this with some narrative around it. I guess what I was thinking moving forward is as a little bit more description as to how these are tying directly to some of the questions around board goals.
Yeah, I got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's my fault. I will bring my paper.
Yeah. It's attachment number 2 in board books, and there's 2 different versions of it.
Yeah, I'm good now.
Okay.
Sorry, what was your question?
So no, I want to acknowledge, and I may not have said it very well. So thank you for pointing out that we did receive this information. I think what I was really asking for was not just sort of this narrative, which is helpful, but a little bit more detail in terms of how this is tied directly to our books. So really sort of getting at that question of, this is describing, the activities, right? And sort of, from a thought process and, like why is this $13 million? Why do you believe it's going to move us towards our student achievement goals? Because I believe you do think it's going to move us towards our student achievement goals, or this funding wouldn't be in.
You know how your algebra teacher used to say, show your work?
I don't know how the budget proposal is going to be structured, but one thing I was gonna ask is just, because we have this herky-jerky process with this, integrated grant application, to make sure in the budget process that we're able to see when we have line items in our general fund budget, how much was allocated through special revenue funds for the same activities, so that we can get a sense of the whole pot. And I'm guessing that the budget proposal is going to be largely organized around our strategic plan and or our board goals. And so when things are called out in the main budget proposal around our board goals, we'll also get a window into how the integrated plan speaks to that as well.
Last year, or for this current year, we did a few tables that help cross-map a lot of the key initiatives. But yeah, I think that's a struggle here, is that we're seeing a sliver of the investment, knowing that there's a lot more happening. On that first tab of the file, it does attempt to do a cross map into some of the PPS goals, not necessarily 5th grade reading, but it helps to try to create some alignment with the specific activities and the codes when we're specifically speaking to IDP1, IDP3. On that planning crosswalk tab, you have a little more details to how the activity impacts the goal.
So of the $13 million, I mean, do you want an answer now, Chair Scott, in terms of?
Yeah, if you have one. And I do make sure we're talking about you said IDB1, but I think it's IDA1, right?
Yeah, A1,
Talking
2,
about
3,
this
and 4.
specific question.
ID.
This is about the Integrated Instructional Framework Strategic Initiative.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
It's A1, 2, 3, and 4.
Got it. Thank you.
So I think back to your question, yes, I mean, if you have it.
Yeah, so it's ID A1, 2, 3?
And 4.
And 4.
So it's the A, not the B.
Correct.
Yeah. The back goes up to pages.
ID 2.
And I think maybe to refine the question a little bit more, and again, why I'm trying to sort of, I'm actually trying to move us on through this.
You keep moving.
What I'm getting at here is like what this describes. I'll give you an example under IDA1. Developing the first version of a culturally responsive and culturally sustaining instructional framework that identifies learning and teaching practices that support all students attaining the graduate portrait. That sounds really good to me. It sounds aligned with our strategic plan and our vision and our ultimate goals. The question I think I heard from a CBRC member is like, when you look at 1, 2, 3, and 4, how are we spending $13 million on that? And I think that's when I asked for that breakdown, which again, I'm comfortable moving forward with the plan you have here. And as part of our budget process, having some of that explanation as to like, okay, so we've described what we do, but how do we get to $13 million? Is it people? Is it materials and services? Like what are the items beneath that? And I think it's important for us to understand because I mean, again, and I want to respect Mr. Cruz, coming to this with the perspective of, $13 million is a lot of money. And I think we owe it to ourselves and to the public to be able to explain where those dollars are going and why we are confident that is an appropriate.
Well, the good thing is we have every line item listed out, so it's a matter of, calling out for each of those and the dollar amount. So to that activity, for example, our PD and CSI schools, $1 million. This other area.
Professional development, implementation of curricular resources for K-12. So that's about $900,000 as well. So I'm just going through.
Grouping them under strategies.
Yeah.
I'm not finding the lead to.
But just a quick question. So when we talk about like some of the grouping stuff, and I look at the funding sources coming out of, which I believe HSS is the high school piece. So for those items, just talk about those like ID 82, ID 83. Those are just for our high school dollars, for high school only.
Correct.
And I guess go back to the rest of our board goals, like the third grade reading, fifth grade math. I don't think that's the alignment that I was kind of looking for.
Right. So to use that example, how do we think our Measure 98 funded activities are contributing to our high school related goals? We're having a good conversation again about that this morning. Where's the scout? There you go. Like an example of some Measure 98 activities that we think is making a positive impact on our.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I get the high school portion.
Okay.
Yeah, I get that part. I was looking about the other goals and where do these line up with those as well? I'm not going to have to answer right this second, but that's kind of where I'm looking at is how do we line up with all of our goals on these items when we talk about the dollars. Sure. Spending, and whether it's the 13 million or it's the 800 some million we have with the general dollars, those are the kind of questions that I think need to be answered because as we are trying to really focus on our board goals using our strategic plan, that's the kind of explanation I'll be looking for.
Right. So you have the listed activity and the amount proposed to support each one, like BD in our media schools, where we see gaps in particular.
Again, I just want to clarify. I'm just clearly asking, just for that particular line item, can somebody just give a quick summary of how we're going to spend the 13 million? That's
designated for IDA2 integrated instructional framework strategic initiative. I don't see it spelled out anywhere.
Yeah, to be transparent, I'm not sure where the specific ID numbers are, but Dr. Armstrong's teams developed like the game plan for what is the plan moving forward, the instructional framework and the variety of different activities.
What I can speak to, I once I find the sheet, I can probably speak to it with more detail. But what I can tell you is if there are activities falling under the instructional framework, it's our items related to teacher professional learning. And even though we know that we received a significant amount of bond dollars to purchase high quality instructional materials, there are still some costs that we have outside of that. So some of our funds listed under that instructional framework goes to the instructional resources. We also know that we have staff that supports, and so I can imagine that maybe there's some funds for a select number of individuals there. But really all of the work that happens under the instructional framework is lifting up our 3 instructional priorities, which is high quality curriculum and our instructional framework and our teacher professional learning. But once I'm able to find the sheet, I could probably talk in more detail.
So if So what I'm looking at for 13 million is around high school success. Because I'm looking at,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I'm actually, that's what I'm really confused, so I don't understand.
Okay, but there's, I'm not seeing 13 million.
I don't see 13 million, that's where I'm really confused, I've been confused since the beginning.
Additional and tiered planning,
In where?
the fourth page of that sheet you were mentioning, it says additional and tiered planning.
Now I'm really concerned.
Well, I think the question is,
I can talk specifically at 13 million for high school success.
so I wanna bring this back for a second. So I just wanna be really clear. We're operating off of, and Mr. Cruz, maybe you can help. In your letter, you referred to funds can be taken from additional and tiered planning tab, section 8, IDA 2, under integrated instruction activities and framework, which has been set for 13.5. So the 13.5 is in your letter. I want to make sure that where you got this from, that we can find that in the staff tables. I think once we can do that, we can delineate where that funding is from. So
I can speak to now knowing where the additional, where that 13.5 number comes from. It's in the tab, the additional and tiered planning. So as mentioned earlier, that's the tab of if we were to receive additional funding, then these are additional areas for investment. And so having conversations with Dr. Armstrong, this could be additional release time. This could be, but yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So somehow we uploaded that tiered level list that Roberto was mentioning earlier. So the 13 million is referencing that tiered list. So again, if we were
Supplemental.
that's what you just said?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
So this, let me see if I'm understanding. So the 13 million is like, if we get extra money from the state above what we're asking for, these are the strategies we would then use.
Correct. So that document shouldn't have been, as an internal, meant to be an internal catalog of things that are happening. That's why it's at a high level. So when you see 13 million under the grant guidance, or for the instructional framework, there's a lot there. That is not what's being funded. This is the tiered level list was an internal document that should not have been posted.
Well, it is part of the plan.
Oh, it is.
To your point, Director Scott, that if we need to make any amendments.
Leslie, can you come up to the?
But, and also.
Hold on, Amy, can you hold on a second? I want.
There's a reason why
I don't
we
want
have
people
to
to just
do
start jumping in on stuff. We've been having a lot of that. So, thank you for explaining, what this document is. And Jonathan, I don't think you meant it this way, but just for the public, and when you said it wasn't supposed to be posted, it is a public document. It is available to anyone.
Yes.
There's nothing hidden or secret.
Nothing hidden.
We're just saying that it's not referencing what we already have. It's referencing what we might be able to get.
Right, and so I'd like to preface, my name is Leslie O'Dell, I'm the
Thank you.
Senior Director of Funded Programs. This is we are operating within an ODE application template. We have personalized the template to the best of our ability to meet our internal and public's understanding of how our budget is and what our strategic priorities are. And so we are required to say what is our proposed 2023-2024 budget, because they've given us an allocation. What is our 24-25 budget, and what are some additional things that we could choose to fund as a holistic plan if funding or priorities change, because this is a 2-year budget agreement. This is an application for 2 years. We know even the past 2 years how quickly things can change and pivot, and we would need to change and pivot if different funding streams came along. And so we have to kind of think 4 years ahead, plan a 2-year budget application, and approve it, and with all of the feedback and community at this point in time in March, in the middle of our budget season. So what we're approving is all of the different activities that we think are needed over the next 2 years to reach our strategic plan and meet our board goals. And knowing that not all of them will be funded through this particular grant, these particular set of grants, but they could be if
if the circumstances presented themselves.
Okay.
I hope.
And so
So
this,
did you
this
just
particular,
say-
hold on a second.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
I know, I'm gonna recognize you in a minute. But what you're saying, this particular dollar is not money that we expect to get, it's money we may get. There's a little bit less detail around that particular $13 million.
Right, that is really what our internal team at this moment in time feel like they would need to fully implement something. And so if a dollar amount is earmarked, that was a dollar amount that the team said, hey, if we're gonna do this, this is what we're gonna hear from our community. This is what we need. And some items, it's kind of like, I'm not sure what we need yet, but we know we need to fund this. So you'll see in the tiered planning, there are X's, and then you'll see that there are also dollar amounts.
Both Amy and Herman wanted to say something. I'll let you guys fight it out.
Mine's quick. All I wanted to say is that there's a very good historic reason for this process, because in the not very distant past, when we had revenue adjustments from the state, we did not have a set of priorities and criteria about how those would be spent. And it was sort of a board free-for-all for several years in a row. So now we say, this is what we need to do. We don't, at this point, have a revenue forecast that supports all of these activities, but this is our second tier activities that we're gonna undertake if we have the money. Just a little history, because I've been around.
Hey, I just got it. So, if I'm explaining this to my people that are asking, am I saying, this is what I'm doing with the money that we have, and if you give me some more money, then this is some of the stuff that I like to do, and this is how much it would cost.
To the best of our
I gotta be real simple.
Yeah, I like
That's
that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
so
that.
that's page,
Yeah.
page 10 of 10, yeah. There's
Okay.
one page of it.
I-
Yes.
I'm a simple man.
Okay.
Understood. We're good now. I'm great. Let's go. Go team.
Mr. Cruz, does that help with the $13.5 million?
I mean, not really,
It's not our money.
because I have, like, I don't know if you guys received any of these documents that we've received, as a.
We have them all, yeah.
But, there's another document that has alignment of the IPG dollars, strategic plan. And one states, develop a integrated instructional framework. Now, as a teacher, that sounds amazing to me. And then it says, design learning experiences that promote self-directed and future learning, differentiating, which is a great term we all need to learn as teachers, which I tried to master, which I eventually did. So now we have 10,000 going towards that learning experience. And we have 10 million, then we have another 2 million. So I'm just wondering if that is part of the integrated instructional initiative that we have the 13 million towards. Because to my knowledge, I don't think that is additional dollars that is part of the plan that you're asking for. The total would be 1 million.
Okay. So I'm gonna need to ask which documents you're referring to.
So this particular document is alignment of the IGG dollars to strategic plan. It has a breakdown in different line items of how the $51 million.
I think it's the slide deck that,
It's a slide deck.
Garcia shared earlier.
And which slide?
Slide 8.
Miss that. That's these amounts.
Yeah, that's those.
Sorry, which slide, or which,
Page 8.
It's alignment of ICT dollars to strategic plan on the slide. See what it is.
Is that the presentation?
So we broke down the 4 million already. Yeah, that's it. So now I believe
This-
the next section where it says develop an integrated instructional framework,
uh-huh.
Alignment of IGG
is
dollars.
that part of the initiative?
So that's
So this is
2
where
million.
we've got $100,000 and 2.1 million, almost
Slide 8.
2.2
It's like-
on that slide.
Under instructional framework, yeah.
Right. Yeah, we got $100,000 on developing integrated instructional framework, and then we got the 10 million in the design learning experience. That's the one you're referring to, right, Ron?
Yes, sir.
Career related learning.
Yep. And then the
So those, so like thinking about the information on slide 8, right? We have the forward together outcomes. We have like the goal, then we have dollars. So $100,000, 2.1, 10.6, 1.2, those are all itemized in that tab. So back to that Excel spreadsheet, that file, the budget 23-24 tab breaks down those details for those specific. So the slide has the summarized information, and then the individual itemized information is on that 23-24 budget tab.
So for example, and I think maybe the way that I would look at it is, again, if you're looking at this budget document here that has the line items, I would say for what is differentiated and flexible learning experiences at $10 million, that is considered IDB3. So.
ID what?
IDB3.
B3.
So then when you look at IDB3, is that right, Leslie? Okay, you're not even here.
I don't have.
IDB3, you're looking at improved FTE ratios for 6th to 8th grade electives, improved arts pathways, 21 FTE, college and career coordinators at 3.5, additional special education support at 9.38 FTE, and you can start to see on the right side is the total budget numbers. So if you take all of that, that would total the 10 million. So that's IDB3. Career-related learning at 1.2 is IDB4. So again, anything that would be IDB4 would be for career learning.
Oh, well,
That's all the CTE stuff, the Perkins money.
Yes.
Differentiating.
So we can find, and the front
Differentiating.
page has the narrative, right, that tells that the front page is what has the crosswalk, so we can take the slide deck, look at the front page, that'll give us the number, the IDB3, and then we can go into the budget things to see what the IDB3 is. Okay.
Thank you.
And I think the natural question is, why isn't the budget tab just have that information? And that goes back to Leslie's comment, we're using the ODE template and trying to.
Ms. Room, I think you had your.
I just had a quick question on that tiered planning page. What did that mean?
That means that they did not have a specific dollar amount at this moment in time with the ask, because we're not through our budget process in general.
Because there were some key things on there like the learning acceleration specialists, reconnection services, middle school redesign supports and resources, improving 9 through 12 grade class sizes, climate justice specialists, I think it was.
Means that those move to the general fund.
So
Those are moving forward outside of this grant process, but we know over the next 2 years, with give or take, where we might choose through an alternate budget process, but we're not there yet. Okay.
I do have one more question on the ITG. What was the determination for not including learning specialists and perhaps some of the budget money for SIA going towards scaling back instead of completely eliminating OLA?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? What was the?
What was the discussion around why we did not include OLA in the ITG, even if it was going to be scaled back instead of completely eliminating it as a program? And I don't know if the board has voted on it yet or not. And also for learning acceleration specialists, why that wasn't included in a grant that's going to be 2 years long instead of just 1 year long.
Oh, wait.
Superintendent, so I think question around OLA and question around the learning specialist.
Yeah, you know, when we were looking at OLA was funded by ESSER, and we shared that the initial constructing of the OLA program was around a response to COVID and those needs. We were looking at, with ESSER dollars going away, looking at how we would be able to manage. I think the IGG, again, are very specific dollars and are very limited. It only represents, again, 2.8% of our budget. And so the decision about OLA was about cost. Regardless of the funding, it was about the cost for continuing the program. And so that's why we did not look at the funding source for OLA, because the cost per pupil was so astronomical in comparison compared to where we were with a reduced enrollment over the period of time since OLA opened up, which was in the 21-22.
Maybe this is a Dr. Franco question because of the former district, but because of the cost, how is it that Beaverton can host a OLA type school that makes it, we have a much bigger option. I'm just curious the differences. Do they have a greater population in the school, like economies of scale, or do they have a different model that is more economical?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with
Sorry.
how Beaverton
have one line academy.
So I will say this about Flex, which is the online school that I helped start it, is they're declining. And actually, because it was K-12, they're only going to be K-5. Moving forward, and there's actually moved some folks over because of the decline. It just wasn't needed. So I don't know about the K-5 enrollment. I don't know why, but I'm sure they've gone through the same types of conversations. But they're not going to operate like they had before. When Flex was at its top, it was around 1,200, and I do believe, based on conversations this year, it's decreasing. And that's it's primarily 500, like around 1,200. It's gone down to 5. And so they have or they will not have a secondary.
So 500 versus like, OLA was it about 200?
Yeah, about 230 students, K through 12, with the average cost of, I want to say it was somewhere around $22,000 per student, where in our general K-12 programs on site, is it 1,300?
Yeah, it varies, but it goes from like 7,000. Volume 2 of our budget book gives you a sense of what it is, but
between 7,000
to 13,000. Alliance is an
per student. It was
But I would
22,000.
Okay, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I just have one last follow-up on that. So did we look at, okay, if people remodel, if we say of the 200 students, say only 50 of them went into PPS and we lost 150, did it make more sense then for us to lose 100, whatever it is, lose versus try and figure out some other model?
Well, I don't know if it's, I know you're probably giving the number for the question. But I don't know that it's that many families. And it's not really a question of, is it worth losing children? Our intention from the beginning was to use each and every family to find a PPS solution for them that would work for their family. I think we have in the tens, and I'll ask Margaret to help me with this and John, but we have a handful of families that now we're introducing the option of other virtual programs where we were really trying to keep them at PPS. We want to service our students with the fiscally responsible programs that we have available to them. And again, I know it's hard for people to hear and understand and perhaps even recall, but the program, we were faced with returning to face-to-face school after a pandemic. We had many families that, expressed a concern with that, so we wanted to make sure that they had an option. as we transition. And the desire would have been to keep OLA, but from the onset, we had, I think at max, 500 some students, and we continued to decline thereafter. If the numbers were robust and justified, even that astronomical spend, but we didn't, it didn't appear, that it was going to be feasible with the decline of enrollment and with the combined cost that is so high compared to our regular per pupil.
Thank you. Director Green?
So my concerns with OLA, because I hear the astronomical number that we're referring to, but I would say that it's the equivalent of what we're paying at Alliance, if not the same. And so if we did a comparison and we say, well, that number is outrageous. Why are we doing that? Why are we doing it with an Alliance? Alliance is like an alternative school, and a lot of the kids that we work with in OLA have different behavioral needs, different emotional needs, just different things that they're dealing with that makes it hard for them to come back to regular traditional school. And so if we're keeping that as a focus, then the numbers that we're saying, they have just as many, if not more students than we have in our Alliance. And so that's, to me, I'm wrestling. I wanted to hear if we decide to keep this, because I'm not sold. I mean, it's not about being sold. The reality is we only need 4 people to say keep it and it stays open. That's the power of this board. You only need 4. I don't care what it is. I don't care about everybody liking it. None of that stuff makes any sense to me. You just got to get 4 people to say do it. And if you get 4 people to say do it, then we have to do it. Okay. And so at this time, what I'm looking to find out, though, before I can just say I'm going to be on the vote for do it, is what is the trade-off? Because I know that if we do this, it's going to cost something. And that money has got to come from somewhere, because none of us have got the money tree. Yeah. And so where does it come from? And then what is the cost associated with those students coming back? So like for every one of those students that comes back, everyone that had a one-to-one, what is that cost that we're now going to have to figure out how to cover? What is the cost of all the different behaviors that was there? Understanding, I mean, I've talked to people that said that they got calls telling their kids not to bring their kids to school because they didn't have staff to cover them because they were runners. Their kids were runners. And I know that to be true. We had a runner at Roosevelt, ran everywhere, ran all over the place. And if you didn't have somebody literally strapped to him at one point, he couldn't be in school. And so I know we've done that. I know we do that. So my cost is, with all of those different needs making their way back into our school system, what is that cost going to be as well? And if it's close, then I want to talk about that, because we're not really talking about 5.3 million if it's going to cost us an additional 2.6 or 2.7 million to cover all those. We're actually talking about a little bit less. So I want to know what the real numbers are, the real trade-offs, and then let's bring that, and now we can talk about, if you do this, you robbing Peter to pay Paul, and this is where it's coming from.
I'm gonna parking lot this, because again, the question from Grace was specifically about the integrated grant and whether there's funds
she
in
brought up
here.
OLA.
No, I know.
OLA hit the table, and
I'm actually going to thank you for that. And so we've transitioned to OLA, which is not a topic for today, but it is a very important budget conversation. So I wanted to let you go because I wanted to get that on the record so that staff could sort of hear that perspective. And I think as we have the conversation about the budget, I want to make sure, similar to some of the things I said earlier, I want to make sure we come back on exactly these questions around OLA as a policy matter, right? And sort of what those fiscal trade-offs are. I do want to recognize both Olympia and Byron E. Had your hands up.
Yes. Well, I was just going to say what I just said to Dr. Proctor is I think Alliance is CSI and OLA isn't, so I think you can't compare the funding of either of them. I think it's it's comparing apples to oranges. And I think people often compare, we spend a lot on dollars per student at Alliance, but Alliance is an alternative school. It's also a CSI, so that's what I would say.
Great.
But the numbers
Thank you.
of OLA
So
are comparable.
Okay, Byron, did you have it?
Yeah, it was just kind of bringing up a theme that I brought up before, but I was just wondering, and I don't think this question has to be answered now, nor do I think it's like going to impact the voting on this item. But I'd just love to know, like down the line, as our Multnomah County and like other partners start to build out their budgets, how the funds that we're spending, especially like around mental health resources, are aligning with that Multnomah County is spending, and kind of seeing how maybe we can work to weave together some of the supports if we're going to be spending money in it.
Okay, so I'm going to bring us back to the integrated grant, and we need to move towards a vote because we're an hour and 15 minutes over. I'm going to get to you in a second. You know how anxious that makes me. So just everyone know, the blood pressure is very high right now, given how late we are. We've got folks here to do presentations, but I want to give. We have public testimony we have to do of folks who showed up to testify on this, and I want to make sure the board has a chance to ask any additional questions.
So I wasn't sure if I actually heard the question that Karan just answer to his question. So can you say your question again for me?
Are we back on the 13 million or the 10 million?
Well, I'm trying to. Okay, it was the last question he asked, but we got into something else with ULA and all that stuff.
I understand you want to switch forward and run the line for it, so we can definitely park a lot of. But I do have a clarification question just in terms of like protocol. I understand that you guys have to vote, and I believe I heard that you guys have to stick with the plan that is already written. Is it possible that you guys can table the vote for possibly next week? I think technically we have to the 30th to do some more collaboration, have a conversation with PAT to see what their needs are in terms of coaching relevant pedagogy, like they stated publicly. So I'm just curious in terms of like protocol, are you able to do that?
Yeah, so we do not have a meeting scheduled next week because of spring break. So this is really our last opportunity tonight to approve this. I hear your point, and I guess I want to make sure that, because I know there was some confusing discussion earlier about stuff. I mean, and I'm glad we got back to like the detail about where all the dollars are going is here. We've had it for a couple of weeks now. I think to your question about the specifics, right, about how it gets developed and the collaboration with folks, that is work that can still happen, right? So we're allocating a budget for next year, but when you say like consulting with PAT on how to do some of this PD, I mean that doesn't have to be done prior to adopting this, right? So that can be done, like the dollars are being allocated, and then that work on what it looks like is going to happen over the next, I don't know how many months as we get ready.
Chair Scott, that work is ongoing.
And
I know PAT continues to say we asked for this, we didn't get it. We have been since the beginning of this year meeting with them to develop a plan for how to provide it. That is in process and ongoing.
And just a clarification, this is the oversight on my part. The 13 million actually was the allocation. It says 2023 to 2024. And then also the slide deck that I also referenced is 23-24. So that was the oversight on my part. I thought it was for the next year. So with that said, has this money already been spent or for this particular? Like, I'm just curious of where these particular dollars are for. Oh, I'm sure. 2023, yes, never mind.
No worries.
Okay. Let's do testimony and then.
Sorry, Director Scott. I know you're trying to move on.
I was going to do testimony and come back for final board thoughts or comments. Does that
that
work?
works.
Okay. Kara, I know we've got some folks who have been waiting a very long time.
People in person, so I'm gonna call them both up and then they can go one at a time. Effie Greathouse and Kendra Larson. Sorry, no worries.
Thank you for being here and thanks for listening to that conversation.
Thank you all for your very hard work for our kids.
And I believe you'll have 3 minutes tonight, and just go ahead and state your name, and Kara will start the timer.
I am Dr. Effie Greathouse. I'm an environmental scientist, and I'm a mom of 2 kids at Hayhurst Elementary. I am one of a few moms here tonight to ask you to make some smart, cost-effective investments of ESSER dollars into safe indoor air for PPS classrooms. My kids' school, Hayhurst, is a school in which the HVAC system does not even provide one single change of air per hour in 15 out of 22 of our classrooms. In addition, the MERV 13 filters that the district installed, they'll help during wildfire season, but they do nothing to stop the spread of airborne viruses in Hayhurst classrooms. The MERV 13s do nothing to improve those scary low airflow numbers for respiratory infections because 100% of the little airflow we get in our classrooms is outdoor air. And while I'm glad that the district staff did their best at the time in securing the IntelliPure air purifiers, the IntelliPures are not enough. The cleaned air they provide is inadequate, even if they are run at full speed. But they can't be run at full speed because they're too noisy, like a jet engine when they're at full speed. When our teachers at Hayhurst run their IntelliPures at the speed level that the noise is acceptable, half speed, we still have 13 classrooms that don't even get 2 air changes an hour, and 2 more classrooms that get exactly 2. And I want to put that number into context. At 2 air changes an hour, it takes 1 hour and 9 minutes for the HVAC system and the IntelliPure to clear out 90% of the kids' respiratory aerosols. In the fall, I watched the White House's Summit on Indoor Air Quality, where the nation's leading environmental health advocates and indoor air experts described the need for a safe indoor air revolution in our schools. And they emphasized the availability of ESSER dollars for investing in the ventilation and air filtration kids in schools need. Getting the IntelliPures was a good first step. The next step we need is to use a small portion of the 75 million PPS has from ESSER 3 to add adequate air filtration capacity to the classrooms where the IntelliPure is not enough. The American Rescue Plan says that ESSER dollars should be used for upgrade projects to improve the indoor air quality in school facilities, including filtering, purification, and other air cleaning. We need more filtration capacity to protect kids, teachers, and families from the spread of COVID, flu, and colds, and to reduce further learning loss from respiratory viruses and asthma triggers that keep kids and teachers home sick instead of in class.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kendra Larson. My son goes to Bridger Elementary School. I am also speaking on the need to use a portion of the ESSER 3 funding for safe indoor air. We need more filters, as Dr. Greathouse described, and we need targeted airflow measurements. It is really fabulous that PPS conducted an airflow testing in 2021. When speaking at the EPA's Spring 2022 webinar series on school indoor air, the head of Boston Public Schools Environmental Health and Safety Department spoke on how you can manage what you can't manage what you don't measure. Okay, so that PPS did all these critical measurements is great, but there are some gaps in the airflow reports as they were published. The first gap is that the reports calculate total air changes per hour, or ACH, for if IntelliPures are running at full speed. IntelliPures, as Dr. Greathouse mentioned, cannot be run full speed in classrooms. So we have to run corrected calculations that reflect the IntelliPure running at half speed. The second gap is that in 16 schools, the airflow, sorry everyone, I'm kind of nervous.
It's okay.
It's okay. Nice to meet everyone. And I volunteer in my son's classroom, and I can attest that these are very loud machines. So anyway, the second gap is that in 16 schools, the airflow reports were done prior to the school being upgraded to MERV 13 filters. And they have ACH, that's air changes per hour, calculated with the old MERV 8 efficiency factor. So we have run a new set of calculations for those schools using the MERV 13 factor. Those are 2 gaps that our group is able to address. But there are other gaps that PPS needs to address by doing airflow reports for schools that do not have them. Access Academy and the new Lincoln High School need airflow testing done. And my son's school, Bridger, is going to need airflow testing after the planned HVAC system upgrade. Likewise, for Harrison Park, Lent, and Kelly, airflow testing will need to be done so that we know what those upgrades accomplish for ventilation and how whether the new airflows meet or fall short of ACH benchmarks and recommendations. What are the ACH benchmarks our classrooms need to meet for safe indoor air? The Oregon Health Authority recommended 3 to 6 to PPS, but at 3 air changes per hour, it still takes 46 minutes for the HVAC system and air purifier to clear out 90% of the respiratory aerosols hanging in the air. Can I finish this?
You can just, finish your last thought.
That is why the California Department of Public Health recommends 6 to 12 ACH for schools. And that is why the Lancet Task Force on Safe Works, Safe School, and Safe Travel recommends at least 6 of these ACH as best for safety from all airborne respiratory infections. At 6 ACH, it takes only 23 minutes to clear out 90% of the aerosols. And the higher we go above 6, it's even quicker, making classroom air better and safer for kids and teachers.
Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Can you also just submit your testimonies, the written testimonies?
Yeah, so you can submit it to, or you can submit it to Roseanne.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, Kara, who's up next?
Yes, we have Amy Carroll. Chief Virtual Officer.
Hey there. Are you able
Hi,
to
Amy,
hear me?
can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hold on a second. We can't hear you,
Okay.
but hopefully we will be shortly.
Okay.
Is that
I'll
on
keep
her
talking.
end, Terry, or ours? Okay.
It says I'll keep talking, so that those captions.
Is that better?
It's, let me see. Hold on
Does
a
that
second.
work now?
Was all right. Thank you. Sorry about that.
All right, let's try
Oh, no
it.
worries.
There we go. We can
Hi
hear.
there.
Welcome.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me. I'm with Effie as well. My name is Amy Farrell. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a public health professional and certified health education specialist. And my 2 children go to Wildon Elementary, which is a Title I school in Northeast Portland. Our group's analysis has focused initially on elementary, middle, and K through 8 schools in PPS, not including Access Academy. Our group's corrected analysis of the district's airflow reports show that there are 595 kindergarten through 8th grade classrooms that are below 3 air changes per hour, and there are an additional 1,110 classrooms, including one of my children's classrooms at Woodlawn Elementary, that are between 3 and 6. We need to invest ESSER dollars into adding more effective and quieter air purifiers on top of the mediocre IntelliPure, to actually get safe air in our classrooms now, when it's going to take years at best to revamp our HVAC system. Even after HVAC system upgrades, effective air purifiers in the classrooms will still work on top of those upgrades. Effective air purifiers clean the air right in the classroom that the kids, where the viruses are brewing. And instead of a virus is left lingering in the air, it will send teachers into sick days and COVID quarantines, which then require substitutes, which then we need to pay extra incentive money. Effective air purifiers also clean the air of the bioaerosols and PM 2.5, and that are the reason for poor ventilation and cause low test scores and sleepy kids who are less able to focus. My youngest child contracted COVID-19 in the classroom last school year. This year he's been hit with 3 respiratory illnesses thus far, resulting in considerable learning loss. Effective air filtration in every classroom is a matter of health equity and is a huge step in remedying the issue of excluding the immunocompromised and disabled students and staff, as well as those that have families with immunocompromised family members and whatnot, as well as reducing the incidence of disability caused by the COVID-19 virus. There are many filters to choose from, and they are often far less expensive than the IntelliPures were. The IntelliPures at half speed, as Effie mentioned, only put out about 182 cubic feet of clean air per minute and cost around $1,000 when paying retail. And we purchase them in bulk. They still cost the district $500 per unit. We have researched lots of different options, including a very powerful, very quiet piece called the Clean Air Kit's Tower of Power. The Tower of Power puts out 480 cubic feet of clean air per minute, and it costs around $300 retail. Even at the retail price for kindergarten through 8th grade rooms, the two towers of power is added to the rooms that are less than 3 ACH, and 1 tower of power added to the rooms that are between 3 and 6 would total $700,000. And the district spent $3.8 million purchasing air filters that aren't getting the job done. And the district now has $75 million to work with and only needs a fraction of that to provide truly safe air for our kindergartners through middle school kids. And that's what I got.
You hit it right on the nose with the time. Thank you very much.
Good.
That's it? Oh, I thought we had more testimony. Okay, great. Then let's come back to board comment.
Are there more than 3 slots available? Because I did
questions.
But
I believe that's what we had.
3 spots for
3 spots for
the way you said that, I thought maybe.
Director of members.
So just to clarify, the public comment was for the next part of the discussion?
No, I think there was a little bit of I think we had people that we thought were signed up on the IGC, but were actually testifying about ESSER funds. And since,
Which is kind of the next-
particularly
next
since we had a couple people here,
That's a couple
I didn't want to shut them down. Yeah.
Okay, great.
But it was not directly relevant to the IGC.
Okay.
Yes.
But it will be to our next budget
It
discussion.
is relevant to the overall
Great,
conversation, yes.
So I had a follow-up to this questions that I submitted. I asked about restorative justice in the middle schools and what the funding is for. And the question I asked is, will we have restorative justice resources in all middle schools? And the answer said, this specific allocation supports 9 FTE of the 12 FTE of restorative justice supports we assigned to middle schools this year. So I just want to make sure that, because it wasn't a yes or no, or here are the schools it's in and here it's not. So my question is, and maybe hey, there's this other money over here that we're mixing all together, and yes, combined, every middle school has some sort of restorative justice FTE. So my question is that we're now down to 9. Does that just mean that 9 middle schools have restorative justice FTE through this, and are there going to be others in the budget, or is it similar to last year, but even smaller group that only some middle schools get those?
So this last year, we added 12 restorative justice.
I'm sorry, can you introduce yourself and come up, or?
Sure.
I think last year there was 12 that the board actually designated that came in as an ad. But it was based on, I think, TSI, CSI, or title designations.
Correct, JBNO, Chief Student Support Services. So last year, during the budgeting process, the board designated 12 specialists to the 12 supported middle schools. And we are continuing those into next year, 9 of which are funded out of this integrated grant. The others are funded through other funding sources. So we have not at this time added to all of our middle schools specific specialists as an additional FTE, but we do continue to have our restorative justice team that are allocated out of the district office, which support specifically other middle schools and our schools across the district.
That's like incident based, correct?
It's prevention, training, support, and then yes, incident response, yes.
So just to make sure I heard you right. So 9 FTE are proposed to be paid out of this, 3 from some other budget category, so there'll be 12 altogether, and then there's what, 18 middle school, how many? There's middle grades at almost 20 schools. What about the schools that don't have that? You're saying that they don't have an FTE per se, but they will get some sort of centralized support?
Okay.
I'm gonna just put a question out that doesn't need to be answered tonight, but when we get into the budget is, did we find that centralized support last year was helpful, just based on conversations with middle school parents, especially at some of those schools? So that's what I'll be interested in, is like, was that enough, or did you want to have somebody embedded at a
So what our
middle
focus
school?
is moving forward, and we move towards that this year, is designating an RJ lead in each one of our schools, and then our central office support staff will be training and supporting and responding them in order to implement RJ. And so in response, yes, the staff that we have allocated to the middle schools have received have been supportive to the focus and goals of the schools. Much of the staff coming in didn't have specific RJ expertise, and we spent most of this year, our centralized support staff, helping them get up to speed with how to onboard RJ at each one of the schools. So yes, they've been a support, and we will continue to use our central staff in order to help move forward and do that then across the district by designating leads, whether they be administrators, counselors, or other support staff that will then support implementation in each one of our buildings.
I'd just like to add, having advocated for one in every middle school in the last budget process and having lost and not garnered board support and kind of followed up with the other principals, I think they would say, yes, it's been helpful to have that centralized support, and they would dearly love to have a designated specialist in each of those buildings that doesn't have one now.
Okay, additional board questions?
Just one last one. And I don't need to have this before the vote. It's not determinative, but I would like to know where it is so I could point to it. And again, we don't need to get off in what tab it's under, but I asked a question about the high dosage tutoring. I didn't see it as an acceleration strategy, and the answer was it'll be funded through SIA under the implement multi-tiered systems of support goal. So I'm wondering if somebody could just send me really specifically where that is and what school and what schools will have access to that.
Okay, so
is that high dosage, like,
got
high dosage tuning, like, what schools is that gonna be available in specific?
Just the break.
Yeah.
Great, so we'll follow up with that information. Okay. Ready to go. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 6680, Oregon Department of Education Integrated Grant Application?
So moved.
Second.
Director Lowry moves, Director Constam seconds. I'm not even gonna ask the question if there's any board discussion. I do want to make sure that we have a chance to hear from Byron if you have anything additional to add.
Yes.
We've heard public comment, so the board will now vote on resolution 6680. And I will just say, I know we went way longer than what was budgeted, scheduled, but joke. But I just want to note, I mean, having to approve this tonight, we needed to get all the questions answered, because again, we have to approve it. And I think also Kieran in particular with OD's regulations around not being able to change this to go down some of those rabbit holes that we went down. With that, the board will now vote on resolution 6680. All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
All those opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
Student Representative McMahon,
Yes.
are there any abstentions? Resolution 6680 is approved by a vote of 6-1 with Student Representative McMahon voting yes.
Let me explain why I said no. Because I think the way the state has structured this grant application process is backwards. And it doesn't leave time for real discussion about the budget stuff. And it puts our district in awkward position of having to something out here that one, we don't even know how much it's going to be funded by. And so that's the only reason why I said no, and otherwise I do agree with what's put out there, but I just had to make sure that's on the record because I think this is it's not an effective or efficient process
I agree.
for a grant application.
Somebody
I-
clip that and send it to them.
I will say, well,
What are we gonna do about
and I was gonna say, I agree with everything you just said. I do want to point out that had 4 of us done that, we would have not submitted our grant application and lost $50 million, but that's okay, that's okay.
Everybody
All right. One more item on our special meeting.
Scary.
Board will now vote on the consent agenda. Ms. Bradshaw, are there any changes to the consent agenda? We have a motion and a second to adopt the consent.
So moved.
Motion, second.
Director Constant moves, Director Green seconds. And is there any board discussion on the consent agenda?
Yes. Oh,
We'll start with Amy.
I have a quick clarifying question for Chief Delgadillo. Sorry, I didn't get this to you before. But there was what seemed like slightly contradictory language to me in the resolution about the general obligation bonds. So it refers to under the remaining authority for the 2020 bond, which leads me to think that that refers to the rest of the money that we have not yet issued bonds for. And then it goes on to use language that says in one or more series. And then it also says expects to be issued in April of 2023. So I'm trying to understand whether we expect that to be more than one series or that we're seeking, you're seeking authority to just do one last bond, final bond issue in one tranche for the 2020 bonds.
So, this is gonna be number 2, and there will be a number 3.
Okay.
Part of the reason why we had to bring a resolution is because there's been updated language at the state treasurer's office regarding how we manage our, it's the Oregon Guarantee Program that serves as a booster for our rating. And so there's been some updated language. Normally, it's a straightforward process from the original authorization, but because of that updated language, we're coming here 2023.
Okay, so we're
There'll
not
be another
expecting
one.
to release our entire, use all of our remaining authority under the 2020 bond in
Correct.
one offering.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep,
got
up
it.
to
That's all I wanted to
$450
know.
million, and then the goal will be to come back in 2025 for the final.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
You forgot the question?
forgot the question.
I'm moving on then before we go. I'm just gonna note that we're approving, I'm just gonna note we're approving 11 field trips, and I can imagine all those kids that are just waiting, they're just waiting for us as a board to know if they're gonna be able to go on that trip.
I'm sorry, I did have a
What a
question.
great use of our time.
I did
Go
have
ahead,
a
Gary.
So
He's
on
goes
the,
in grave with that.
on the authorization for campus activities with the dollars that we spent, I'm just understand why some of them had equity dollars put it and some of them wasn't. Like when I look at the 2 college trips, like there was no dollars associated with it, but then on another one there was equity dollars associated with it. So I know that's like Marcus area. So
Are you gonna make your statement?
huh?
Oh, I just made my statement.
No, I just wanted to
All right, so the question is how are the equity dollars? Do you want that question answered now, or is you okay with follow?
Yeah, I can get the follow up.
Okay, good. With that, we are gonna move on to the vote. And did you want to explain your exemption or?
I'm abstaining because my kid is going on one of the field trips.
Excellent.
If we approve it.
The board will now vote on resolution 6675 through 6679. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Student Representative McMahon,
Yes.
and are there any abstentions?
Yes.
Consent agenda is approved by a vote of 6-0, with Student Representative McMahon voting yes and 1 abstention.
Well, that's spring break.
Okay, we are now going to move into our work session. So we're adjourning the special meeting, moving into our work session. My understanding is that we need to move the room around. It's going to take about 5 minutes.
I just got one question. I mean, one comment.
Barry doesn't want us to move on.
I'm so sorry. But I've been wanting to do this and I haven't been able to do it yet. So, because we went to the student change. So on the expenditure contracts, I have noticed that we have been intentional on having minorities and women contractors on our contracts. And so I know a lot of it was Dan. So even though I know I give him a hard time about it all the time, I need to give him credit for it as well. I have seen a lot of integration with that as far as making sure we have our minority and women contractors on them. So thanks, Dan.
I noticed that as well. Thank you, professional.
Oh, I know. All right, so we're gonna, do you need us to move our stuff off the tables, or are you okay?
Yeah, we're gonna rearrange, so.
Pick up our things.
Oh, sorry, I've been meaning to say something for the last year.
Okay, I want to talk to you. I do.
Okay, I'm gonna bring us back. If everyone could find your seat, it should be on the name, should be on the table. You should be able to find your name, find where you are. I'm just gonna start us off and then I'm gonna turn it over to the superintendent. So, all right, bring it a little bit into focus. All right, so this work session of the Board of Education for March 21, 2023 is called to order. For tonight's work session, we are joined by ERS who will work with us to create a shared understanding of how resource use in our schools aligns with system and strategy and research-based practices in our classrooms. We're also joined again this evening by our Community Budget Review Committee. Thank you for your time. Before we get started, I do think it'd be helpful if we can make sure to introduce our CBRC members who are joining us virtually this evening and also our guests from ERS. Let's do that, and I'm going to have one more thing to say. So do we have any CBRC members?
Don't think so. Just double check with Kara for sure.
Great. Kara, do we have any CBRC members virtually tonight?
We did, but we're working with them to get them back.
Okay, so we'll introduce when they come. If our CBRC members could raise your hands and do a quick introduction.
Roger Cruz.
Great, thank you.
Olympia Calvert.
Great, thank you.
Roger Kirschner.
Did we lose Grace? Oh, right there. I'm sorry, I didn't even see you there. Great, and then do you want to introduce the ERS?
We'll introduce as we go.
As you go through the presentation. Okay, it is 8:25. This was originally scheduled to be about a 100-minute overall work session. It's late. We've started at 5. I've been talking a little bit with the team, and we're going to try and condense it into about 75 minutes. But here's what I'm going to ask of both board and CBRC. There's a lot of material that's going to be presented to us tonight, and I think the best use of our time is to do what we can to actively listen and take that material in. There are going to be some points, I think, in the presentation where if you have clarifying questions, there will be time for clarifying questions. But if we have some of the broader big picture questions, I'm going to ask you to write those down. And we're not going to go down those paths tonight. What we're going to do is write those down. We'll be able to submit that. Roseanne, I'll work with you on the best place to sort of submit those centrally. And we're going to get that into sort of our overall Q&A. ERS can help answer that. Staff can help answer that. So we're going to get those questions answered. But for the purpose of time tonight, parking lot those questions. Does that make sense to everybody? And again, there'll be a little bit of time for clarifying things as we hear tonight. But mostly what we're going to be doing tonight is hearing from ERS and staff about some of the work and analysis they've been doing. So. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent and the team.
Sure, if we can queue up projects that we have for everyone tonight. Directors, CBRC members who are joining us, and the ERS team that's flown in to be with us tonight. It's another opportunity for us to continue a conversation around the through line. We're not throwing spaghetti at the cabinet here. We've been trying to be sequential about our work. Work with our community to define a vision, outline those areas we believe are going to build organizational capacity, improve student outcomes. Many of those strategies are what you see broken down into the various line items as we go through our budget phases. And we have our board goals. Those are the indicators that we think that we're trying to impact here. So this evening, it's the same, in our work with our partners at ERS around, is the alignment seem strategic? What's current practice? What have been past investments? Recalling a lot of the data you'll be looking at again today was for last year. Already there's been some adjustments. It's prompted a lot of great conversation among the senior leadership here and the staff So we're gonna continue in that vein with another level of deeper understanding around a few areas, courses, the breadth of those that are available to impact the student experience, how we've incorporated some input that we got from some principal surveys, and also some data from our employees as well. So we're going to hit each of those areas. The materials are posted, and that's what we're hoping is an outcome for the day. And we're going to cover a little more of what those objectives are, but I'm going to turn it over to, I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I am Angela King-Smith. I'm with ERS, and we're excited to be with you all tonight. We are an organization that works with districts all around the country, really focusing around resources. And when we think of resources, we're not just thinking about dollars and cents, we're talking about time, people, and money. And so on the screen, you'll see our mission, and our focus is really around making sure that we're helping systems to think strategically about how they're using those resources to support the students with the greatest learning needs. We partner, like I said, with district teams and really focus around trying to build system capacity around their resources and to help them to think about how to not only be efficient with those resources, but effective with those resources as well. I have some other folks in the room. You have an ERS person likely sitting at your table. We are all spread out. To my right is Courtney Hitchcock. She's going to be helping to present some of the information that we have here. Natalie Elliott, who's sitting over there, she's been helping to crank out all of the analysis that you're going to be seeing tonight. Arjun Shah, he also has been helping to support collecting the analysis and thinking through many of the things that you're going to be seeing here tonight. Jonathan Travers, he is our managing partner for our organization, and he works, has been doing this for a number of years. When I was chief in an urban school district, he was one of the people that I called on as a thought partner to help think through some very tough decisions that we needed to make as a school district. And then right here, we are excited to also see Sam Brobeck. He has also been working closely with this project over the past few months. So we are all excited to be here with you all today. Our objectives and our agenda. So as I said, we work with school districts around the country to help make those school decisions, to make strategic resource decisions. And that's what this project is all about. We've been working with you all for, kind of goes back till the fall. And now we're here this spring to kind of share some specific results around some of the key priority areas that you all have identified. Around thinking about how to be financial sustainability with your resources, to think about how to support your strategic plan, and to think about your strategic goals that you all have identified as a system. So today you're going to see how those resources, we were here in the fall talking about overall district resources. Today we're going to specifically talk about teacher quality and instructional attention. And as in the fall when we did our earlier session, we really want this to be a space for reflection. We want this to be an opportunity for discussion, though we are going to time box the discussion a little bit. But today we really want to focus on those two particular areas, and you can see the agenda that we have outlined below. So the norms for today's discussion, as I said, we are going to break out into groups, which is why we're kind of organized in this way. We really want you all to be able to utilize the norms that are on the screen to stay engaged, even though I know it's a little late. Just really think about speaking your truth, experiencing discomfort. Some of the information may be some stuff that you've never seen before. So we really want you to look at it, think about it, reflect, listen for understanding and empathy. Also, really assume good intentions from all of your respective table mates. And also, we want you to kind of be in a strengths-based, asset-based approach when you're thinking about and talking about the work, and then working collaboratively with your group members. And then here's a way we want you to think about the data. One, we really want you to think about what is being shared. Look at the data that's on the screens as we're kind of going through the analysis. What is the data telling you? We want you to be objective about that. And then we want you to assimilate that, connect that with your particular district experience, your particular district role, and thinking about the particular individual context. But then we want you to take and put your systems hat on and think about what does this mean across the system. And that's going to be really important. We also want you to not look at the data in isolation and to try and look at the big picture. And we want you to approach this work from a place of learning and inquiry. So you have your groups. As I noted, your ERS person that is at your table, for the few people that don't have a person at your table from ERS, we're going to be taking notes in those other respective. I think Roberto is going to be the person in the group that does not have an ERS person, but we're going to be taking notes. We've asked the SLT members to kind of serve in a role as kind of a facilitator to keep us going in terms of the content and to keep us on task. And now I'm going to turn it over to Courtney to kind of go over some data and methodology.
Great. So hi everyone, I'm Courtney. I will be going over now just a couple of slides on what data we're actually going to be looking at, so we're all grounded in what we're looking at. So we have 3 different data sets that you'll be seeing throughout today. The first is course schedule data from last school year, from school year 21-22. So this is student level course data that you'll see for student and teacher pairings and class sizes. As I mentioned, this is from last year, so this won't capture any changes that have come into place in this past year, so I wanted to name that now. We'll also be looking at human capital data, so employee level data for the last 5 years. And then the last, we'll be looking at school leader survey data from this past December, so that is recent data. A couple of other data notes that we wanted to call out explicitly. So there are a few moments where you'll see we'll be looking at data broken out by race or ethnicity. We do this so that we can call out experiences, particularly for Black and Hispanic, Black and Native students, which we know are a priority for the district. So you'll see that breakdown in a couple of places. And also just want to name for the course schedule data in particular, we'll be focusing on general ed classroom classes in particular for this analysis. The last data methodology note just to call out is for today we're focusing the analysis on 80 traditional programs and 80 traditional schools in the district. And so as you're seeing different views of the data, those are the schools that are included in that analysis. And I will pass it over to Jonathan.
Okay. So let's sort of now start to get into it. And I want to start us a biblical maps, like the 30,000 foot looking down at the whole thing, whole picture. What does it mean to be an effective steward of organizational resources? And what does it mean to effectively align our resources and strategy with effective practice? You know, I think I find it helpful to actually work backward from student outcomes. At the end of the day, we are trying to allocate our people, time, and money across our system to ensure our students achieve the outcomes that we, the day, aspire for. We can invest money in ways that seek to do that, but we invest that money in ways that then create student experiences. It's those student experiences that then generate those outcomes. It's not that we decide to invest more money in this thing and therefore automatically get this outcome. It runs through a logic model to get to that. There's 2 parts to what we think about effective resource stewardship. One is how much are we allocating to what, and 2 is how well are we using the resources that we've allocated. When we were with you back in December, we talked a lot about, as you may recall, how much are we spending at each of our schools? How is that purposeful? How is that aligned with our strategy? How is that aligned with our perceptions of student need in those schools? Today, we're going to be shifting to looking at how well. What are we doing with those allocations in schools, and what does that mean for the experiences that we're creating for students that ultimately, we hope, drive those student outcomes?
Those of you that were with us back in, oh, wait, I have this, there we go. Those of you that were with us back in the last time we were here, will recall we looked at the per pupil spend at each of your schools, and we made the observation that your per pupil spend in your highest need schools, defined TSI Title I, was significantly higher than your per pupil spend at your schools that you deemed as lowest need. In fact, that differentiation of higher spend, high need, lower spend, low need, was greater, that differentiation greater than we've seen in a lot of other districts across the country. So significant differentiation in per pupil funding. Good. The question now is, how are those schools, how are we organizing resources in those schools to drive the experiences that we want our students to have? And so we saw that on a per pupil dollars basis. We also saw that on a staffing basis. On the right here, this chart shows that your highest need schools are being allocated significantly more staff than your lowest need schools. We talked about that when we were together last time. So bridging back to resources and outcomes, how much, and we have this question where we are differentiating significantly, and yet our outcomes are not what we aspire them to be. We have gaps going in the other direction on the outcomes, and in fact, your strategic plan, the conversations that we've had with leadership, I think reflects a focus on shifting the outcomes that we've got here. The data, if you can just move that text box for a second.
Hey, Terry, it's automatic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you move it?
Yes. Thanks. Just want to show screen there. Yeah. So we have on the left here the per pupil and the staffing levels. We have on the right last year's map results, and I would, and so we see stark differences at this at this midpoint of last year. And if I do want to ask, Bernard, just to jump in a little bit, just to talk about, we're looking at high and high average MAP scores. I know, as we talked about earlier, the system uses MAP data in several different ways, and this is maybe different from how you all have looked at it previously. So
Right.
just let me pause and turn over.
Sure, thank you. And so, Bernard Adams, Chief of Research, Assessment, and Accountability. Typically, the most frequent way we look at our MAP data is with the growth. We want to make sure the students are growing a year for every year they have with us academically. And that's growth data. Another way we can think about MAP data is from an achievement standpoint. And MAP stratifies achievement from low up to high, with low average, average, and high average in between there. And so for the analyses here, ERS really looked at students at the high and high average end of the MAP scores. Those are students that are more likely to be proficient on OSAS based on our understanding of MAP data. And so you can see what those differences look like as they called out on the screen between typically Black students in the middle school versus white students in middle school. This is from last winter's data.
So we're left with this question. We have the research, the funding levels and staffing levels on the left, and the unacceptable outcomes on the right. What's happening in the middle here? What is it that students are ultimately experiencing that's leading to this contrast in outcomes? And so that's where this conversation is going to pick up today, unpacking the dimensions of, you can think of as dimensions of resource equity, dimensions of that student experience that the funding and staffing are seeking to provide. We're going to home in, as Angela said before, we're going to home in on two aspects that we know make a significant difference from just a research perspective at evidence-based practice, teaching quality and diversity, and instructional attention. We're going to basically focus our time as two conversations, one on each of those. You will see in this that on the teaching quality and diversity, PPS is putting in place several essential elements of a teaching quality workforce. We've got a stable workforce. We've got recent investments in curricular materials and instructional framework. The next step that this analysis identified is really going to focus on setting up expert-led collaboration time for teachers, and regular observation and feedback. So we'll get under the hood of what that looks like now and what that might look like moving forward. On the instructional attention piece, we're going to talk about the fact that you are investing more instructional staffing. You are investing in more instructional staffing than comparison Oregon districts. And that investment in instructional staff is used to support class sizes on the lower end of your intended, of the ranges that you targeted in schools. Within schools, how are schools actually differentiating student experience based on need? That is, as we'll share with you, that is largely driven by within classroom practice and not across classroom practice. So Courtney will talk a little bit more about what that means. Part of the allocation of extra staffing we're seeing goes to providing a wide breadth of course offerings in our schools, in our secondary schools. That is an important part of a student enrichment, student engagement strategy. We'll talk about some of the trade-offs implicit in the allocation of resources toward the breadth of course offerings that you have, and talk a little bit about what that might mean for you all moving forward.
So I'll jump in with, kick us off with this teaching quality section. So as Jonathan named, we're going to look at teaching quality in a couple of different ways. We'll start looking more at the system level to understand the stability of the teacher workforce, how the teacher workforce is distributed across students, and then we'll move into some of those school level practices around professional development and support for the teachers in schools. I really want to ground in the vision that the district and the community has laid out for the instructional strategy here. And so we see a really strong vision that's grounded in this instructional strategy across these three areas: the instructional framework, the curriculum adoption, and the teacher professional learning. And to us, this is a strong foundation from which the district can build. And so part of today is now we want to understand how resources are supporting this vision. So we'll start by first looking at teacher stability of the workforce. So this is looking at the teacher turnover rates. What % of teachers are turning over each year and leaving the district or school? And what we see is that PPS has actually really low teacher turnover rates, the lowest of the 8 national districts that we've compared over this same time period of these last 5 years over COVID. These national districts are large urban districts similar to Portland. And so we see again that this is the lowest. So the way to read this chart is over the last 5 years, on average 16% of teachers have either left the district, so 7% have left the district, 3% have left the role of teaching but have stayed in Portland. And 6% have left their specific school and moved to a different school in Portland. And so again, we think this is a real strength, the stability of the workforce that we don't see typically in other urban districts.
Did you compare it to the other large districts in Oregon?
I don't believe we have, but that's a great question.
Yeah, quick question. When we talk about teacher attrition, do we disaggregate it by race?
Yes, we did, and there are some differences as well. But overall, again, compared to national, they are lower than national trends. So in addition to this metric, so this, again, has strengths in that we see there's a stable workforce. We also know that we looked at novice teachers, what this means for the number of new teachers coming into the district, and that is also lower in Portland than these other urban districts. And the last thing we wanted to name...
What's your definition of novice teacher?
Yep, novice teacher are teachers in their first, under 3 years of experience teaching, not just in Portland, but teaching overall. The other thing we wanted to name and call out is school leaders feel strongly about the teachers in their building. So when we ask school leaders in the survey about the teachers, 88% of school leaders reported that they have enough effective teachers to enact the transformation plan at their own schools. And so again, just as a starting point, we see this stable workforce, which we don't often see. We see principals that believe in the teachers in their school. They believe they have the right folks to enact their plan. So these are two things that are standing out to us that we don't, again, often see in urban districts that we're working with. We're now going to switch, so we see this overall, we want to switch to the distribution of teachers across students. And we're going to look at this first by understanding how students are experiencing time with novice teachers. Before I jump to that data, I want to just put some framing around that. So I think we just define novice. So again, we're talking about teachers with less than 3 years of teaching experience overall. So they could be new to Portland, but if they've been teaching before that would not be a novice teacher. So we're talking about new to teaching overall. And the reason we want to talk about novice first, we have kind of 3 things we're thinking about. One, we want to understand if there's patterns across the distribution of students. So if we see that here with novice teachers, that might clue to us that we should look elsewhere. The second thing is that research does tell us that novice teachers, or teachers in the first 3 years, are less effective on average than those same teachers 4 years plus. And so we know there's exceptions to that. We're not saying that novice teachers are not effective, but that is research that is saying that those are less effective than 4 years plus. So we want to start there to understand what might be happening. And then the last thing I'll say is, again, we look at this data nationally, and we often see really big gaps in this area. And so that was a clue to us, again, to start here. What we see in Portland is actually something different than what we see nationally. So we see that students, when we break it down by race, are actually experiencing time with novice teachers pretty similarly. So I'll start with the K-5, and then we'll build up. So the way to read this is, you can see the bars are broken down by race. So this is saying 11% of Black students in 21-22 were with a novice teacher as their homeroom teacher. You can see how that compares for the other races here, and you see some differences. Right? We can say 11 compared to 9 or 11 compared to 8. There's some differences by race, but these are pretty small percentages. We see, again, the same trend when we look at secondary. We see similar trends. Secondary, I will note the metric is slightly different because it's not one teacher that student is with. We are talking about the percent of class time they're spending with a novice teacher over all their coursework. But again, we see small percentages. In this K-8 example, the difference between a Black and a white student experience is about a half a period more that a Black student is experiencing with a novice teacher. So when we look at this, there's kind of 2 takeaways that I was taking away. One is, yes, there are differences. There are potentially opportunities to make sure that students aren't disproportionately with certain types of teachers. That seems important. And 2, that this is actually relatively small in magnitude compared to what we see often.
I'm curious, in addition to race, did you look at economics?
We do not have the data, the student level data to do the socioeconomic. But that is also, again, a great way to think about it.
We're not able to share that student level data around direct certification. We have to, even my team has to sign off on confidentiality to be able to look at it. At the individual student level, it's different when we look at the percentage of a school.
That's what I was thinking, more schools, looking at the K-8s, thinking that they're more economically disadvantaged, have been economically disadvantaged, and that's where just it's another compounding factor.
So is this the data that you provided for them? So the district provided this data to you?
Yes.
Yes, this is from the course enrollment data that they provided to us, yes. I'm going to move us forward. The last thing we looked at from this system level is teacher diversity and access to teachers of color. And so when you see her, it's probably not surprising, but we think it's worth calling out. So again, research tells us that for students of color, it is really important to have access to adults and educators of their own race. This impacts their experience, the way they feel about themselves, the way they can succeed in school. And so we wanted to look at that. I'll start with the green bars. The green bars are the ones that you probably have some idea of already. This is the percent of students that have a teacher of the same race. So I'll zoom in just for a second on Black students. So for K-5 Black students, 9% of them are in a homeroom with a Black teacher. And we can see for the students of color that those numbers are pretty low. We have, again, a similar metric for secondary, for middle and secondary. Again, this is looking at any class the percent of students that have any class with a teacher of the same race, so it's a little bit higher just because there's multiple classes. But again, you can see these numbers are in the. We know this is an area of focus for the district to attract and retain educators of color. This is something that districts across the nation are grappling with, so we understand that feels important.
612 is different classes, so how do you determine that data?
Yeah, so this is if they have any class. So they could have one class with a teacher of the same race, or they could have multiple. But we were just saying, do they have access to even a single teacher of the same race? The gray bar we added in just to put this into perspective, given the demographics in the district. So the gray bar shows us what would we expect to be the percent of students with teachers of the same race, given the racial makeup of the district. So if we just had all teachers kind of distributed evenly across schools and classrooms, what would we expect to see? And so you can see those gray bars are lower than the green bars. So we might expect that 3% of Black students are with a Black teacher. It's actually 9%. So it's a little bit better than what we might expect. And so again, this data suggests to us that PPS is really focused on the right things. The focus here is really on attracting and retaining teachers. Once they're in the district, the distribution and assignment is actually giving access to students. I think we are going to keep moving along and get to a discussion on teaching quality at the end of this section, so I'll keep us moving. So we've now looked at a little bit about teacher workforce at the system level. We want to move into some practices at the school level around development of teachers. And so I wanted to start with just at the highest level, if we go back to that vision that has been laid out, what are we seeing, or what are school leaders reporting at this highest level? And we see kind of two things. First, school leaders are really calling out and reported real strengths in the instructional framework and the curriculum adoption. These were something that really principals highlighted and stood out to us as strong enabling conditions, as things that were going really well. So that was really exciting to see. The second thing that we heard from the school leaders is that there's opportunities around teacher professional learning. So school leaders were naming in their comments really as a place for some change and a desire for more school-embedded professional learning. And so when we heard that feedback, that made sense to us. This sequence of the district really focusing on instructional materials and instructional framework first, and really getting that strong and right makes sense. And now building out to ground professional learning practices around those materials feels like a logical sequence. And so we want to spend the next few slides really talking about teacher professional learning, since that's the place that principals were calling out to us. So as we've been through our work and through research about what strong professional learning looks like, we typically think about 3 elements. The first is rigorous assessments and curricula. So we talked about that a little in the previous slide. The second is content-focused, expert-led collaboration. And the third is frequent observation and feedback. From the school leader survey data, we see strengths in that top area, and then we see mixed responses in those bottom 2. So we'll dig into those bottom 2. We'll start with collaboration, and what we'll see is that there's opportunities here really system-wide to invest in collaboration. So we asked school leaders 3 questions that typically relate to strong attributes of collaboration. The first was how much time are teams that share content or grade level meeting each week. We typically think about 90 minutes as a strong practice. And what we were seeing is that close to 70% of school leaders are reporting that teams are meeting for less than 1 hour each week. So there's not much time dedicated each week to collaboration right now. The second thing we asked are how are schedules enabling teams to meet with the right folks. There was a stronger positive response here, so we see 64% of school leaders agreeing that schedules enable this, although you can see that as you move to middle school and high school, this number gets a lot lower. Again, that makes a lot of sense. Middle school and high school schedules are very complicated. It's hard to make it work, and so that's not necessarily surprising, but is something to keep an eye on. And then the last thing we asked about is what percent of teams are led by an instructional expert. So we think it's important to have, if you're having this time for collaboration, that it's really led by a person that is prepped and able to lead that time. And you can see that more than half of school leaders are saying that less than half of their teams are led by an instructional expert. This could be a school administrator, it could be a teacher on the team. Just want to remind folks that a few slides ago we saw that principals are saying that they have a lot of enough effective teachers to enact their plan, and we're seeing at the same time that there's not all teams are being led by instructional experts, and so we think there's an opportunity there to leverage the folks in buildings to really support this collaboration. Great. The next thing we asked about was observation and feedback. So we gave school leaders this statement: core teachers receive regular cycles of observation and actionable feedback, at least 12 hours annually with a content-specific expert. And we had 15% of school leaders strongly agree or agree with this statement. We know a couple of things about observation and feedback. One, we know it's really important, particularly when districts are rolling out new materials, to get that feedback in real time on what's working, how to do it well. We also know that 12 hours annually is a big investment. This is not an easy thing. This is not a small amount of time. So this is hard to get to. And so I know there's work in the district going on right now around this. I'm going to pass it over.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that point. And just to underscore that much of the work that we have been engaged in this year is to strengthen our protocols in terms of being out in classrooms with our content experts. And I know that you've heard a lot about the instructional coach model. We envision those instructional coaches working with an instructional leadership team with content level experts to get into the classroom and regularly review, give feedback, and mentor, in some cases, teachers that are interested in the need of those mentoring. So while that percentage is low right now, I'm hopeful and excited that we'll see significant gains over the next 12 months.
The last thing, just building on these spotlights that we know are happening in the district, I also wanted to name one other program that's happening that does connect back to a lot of these practices that we're talking about. So I want to specifically spotlight the 9th grade academy as a model that potentially can be learned from across the district or can be scaled in ways. So in the 9th grade academy right now, teachers are meeting in grade level teams. They're supported by these experts, other additional staff and experts. They're meeting regularly. We know in addition to that teacher experience, that the student experience is impacted by these 9th grade teams. And so this is one example of things that are happening in the district that feel really from. I'll say in this 9th grade academy example, I do want to name explicitly that there is an additional investment going towards this in the form of an additional release period for those teachers participating. And so obviously that is not a free thing. And so if a model like this is going to be scaled or replicated in other ways, that will require different resource trade-offs. It's not just a switch that can kind of be turned on or off. I don't know if Margaret or others want to jump in more on the 9th grade academy piece.
Thank you. I think just as part of the thinking about dedicated time for collaborative learning, the 9th grade teams have worked not only in PPS but across the state, and looking at with the Center for High School Success and various other groups, and really looking at how important 9th grade success is towards building towards graduation, and that this is an investment that was targeted for that explicit purpose to help students make transitions to high school. And we know that their progress in the freshman year then builds to as a predictor for high school graduation. So we attend to that pretty explicitly and track information around on-track status. This is a way of getting some leading information on a lagging indicator, because graduation is lagging indicator. So this is an example of a leading investment that then produces an outcome that's part of our board goals, as was mentioned earlier, and talking about where can we see this investment leading directly to a board goal, and this is an example of that.
And just underscoring that our graduation rates that we were celebrating not too long ago Our graduating class of 2022 were freshmen when this program started, and so we're excited and anticipating continued increase in graduation rates over time.
So now we'd like to take a few minutes, because you've heard a lot, regarding some of the strengths in your teacher quality, or in your teachers, in terms of a stable workforce, your recent investment in instructional materials. And we also talked about opportunities to kind of strengthen instructional quality in this last segment. So we'd like for you to kind of focus on what you heard around teacher quality, and in your groups, talk about what stands out for you? Was there any ahas, something you just learned? What did you notice? Also, how might this inform some of the conversations that you're having in the district or current work that's happening in the district? So we're going to give you about 5 minutes or so. We'd like for you to engage with your groups, and then we'll kind of do a check-in. I know we're a little bit tight on time, but maybe we'll have one group to share out, but we'll just have to see in terms of time. So I'm going to go ahead and have you to turn to your groups and engage in the questions on the screen.
Observation time. This is data.
Your observations. It's a lot. I would say, it kind of came up maybe a little more specific about we were saying that on one hand they talked about having some success usage. On the other hand, they said a number of things that by first semester just ended. Specific subject it's the highest. Yeah. And I think one of the takeaways was maybe one thing that's just there was a survey issued there. You ask a generic question of, I'm assuming these are principles, right? Or you ask a generic question, do you have strong teams? They could say, yeah, I've got I found that interesting. That doesn't usually be that. You have some content very leading that to expertise.
That stood out to me, and then the other thing was
I just wonder if there's why I was circle back and say, I'm just thinking about
course schedule.
well, not even I wonder if there is a question there's that well about a granular level, they'd say maybe my team there was content specific experts. As a principal, if I were reading it, I'd be like, well, I can go into my classroom. I think I don't know if I could go to English class because I taught specific physics. That piece.
Remember that whole class project way back when the state organ member? So it never flew to the class. Exactly that. They had teaching here.
So,
yeah, I think so, but I guess maybe
like became the advocates for it. Like after here, they realized like I've never been so especially energized as
so I believe
perfect.
Then the question is, okay, how do you fill that time?
I'm hoping you see the connection between the principal saying they need more psychoprofessional development and the budgetary to provide instructional solutions. That was basically very intentional.
I think it's great because as I talked to a lot of principals,
right. And so one of the primary goals would be to turn key to professional learning. So here's our, we're in year 2 of written wisdom at the K-5 level for ELA, and we've got some professional development series. So the coaches will come in, the coaches will come to get that experience, and then be expected to turnkey that with the staff in their building, which would then put them in a position to coach and provide support to other teachers. But I don't know
Meaning
if they
that
can
you have a
serve
floater or
in the
you have
value
more release times, right?
Teacher, right?
Which some schools do.
Yeah. And actually,
Oh, there we go.
how do you resource that? Yeah. But then there's also all the cultural issues. There's fear, fear of parents, and then be able but if it's your peers, you have a better shot at it. Right.
So even though generally, now basically,
Yeah.
they're gonna know like,
Like your baby step. And then hopefully, start to see the feedback loop is hopefully pretty quick in the sense that you start to see greater student success, which is energizing as a professional. The process is supporting you. Or to like stand by their right?
I think it might be the one piece of it is not necessarily.
Well, just from the very beginning, the question I'll probably ask
A little bit small,
to both.
but it's to me it's again it's still
There's just
actually time. I think about research around and provide training and documentation. And I guess I was thinking more
Not seeing results. Well, to what extent is that strategy or is it just
But I'm gonna try to keep us moving.
so that's something that
I'm gonna ask you guys to wrap up your conversations in 60 seconds.
Yeah, because that's
so it's not this much. Really, they should. That, in my opinion, is I think that feels like
Okay, I'm gonna ask that we go ahead and close these conversations, but I know you want to keep talking. All right. All right, let's focus our attention onto the screen, and we're gonna focus on the next topic, which is on instructional intention. So hopefully we got everybody's attention. We got some chocolate coming out. All right, go ahead.
All right. Thank you all. All right, so hopefully you all can get some chocolates. We can talk about instructional attention. So this is our second topic for the evening. We want to understand how resources are organized at the district and school level to really differentiate attention and support the highest priority areas, whether it's students, subjects, what it might be. And so we'll start similar to what we looked at in teaching quality. We'll start first at the system level to see where investments are going, the system level, and then move down into school level practices. So if we start at the highest level, looking at instructional staff in the district, what we see is that PPS is investing more in instructional staff than other comparison Oregon districts. And so this is looking at gen ed student-teacher ratios for PPS in green compared to these 5 districts in Oregon. And you can see there's a 2-student difference in that ratio. And so this is a big investment from the start. So we see PPS is making this deliberate investment in instructional staff at that system level. So then we want to dive down one level deeper to understand how is this playing out across schools. And what we see is that instructional staff is going into schools and resulting in class sizes on the lower end of PPS's stated ratios for all school designations. And so this is first looking at K-5 and 6-8. So I'll just talk through how to read this chart using this CSI as an example. So this blue bar represents the average actual class size for those CSI schools. So on average, in CSI schools, the class size is around 18 students. These bars, so this yellow bar up to the top of that red bar, represents the stated range for class sizes in the core handbook. And so we can see that range goes somewhere around 15 to around 30. We've made this cutoff just as a helpful way to look at this data. We've made this line, that's the midpoint in that range, just as a way, again, to understand what the investment looks like. And so what you can see is across all of these different levels and different designations, that blue bar is well below even the midpoint range of these ranges. Just to give some sizing to this investment and to help put that magnitude, if you can see that in the call, this magnitude of having class sizes at where they are, as opposed to having at that midpoint range, is around $20 million. And so this is a big investment, big deliberate investment to lower class sizes that the district is making.
Is this based off the belief that we would see success for lower class sizes, basically?
This is just looking at what is happening. So this is good, bad, I don't know, but this is what is happening in the district right now. We're seeing these class sizes.
Right, I understand that. I was just trying to get to the intentions, right? Like, of the whole presentation. Like, if we are talking about like investments and dollars and allocations, I'm just curious, is the notion that this particular picture that we have a lower class size that we're going to see better achievement? It's the question.
I would say that, if I could jump in, I would say that we believe that class size is one dimension along a continuum of many dimensions that lead to improved student outcomes. There's class size, there's teacher quality, teacher experience, leadership in the building, curriculum materials. That was the one I was professional development and coaching, right? And so we know that this is one of the ways that we're investing in trying to get the academic outcomes we want for students, but I would not say that it is the investment by itself.
So we see this investment at the K-8 level. We see a similar story when we look at high schools. So again, we're looking at all high schools. The blue bar represents their average core and non-core class size. The yellow bar is a little bit different. There's not a range in the same way for high school. So this is looking at this what the stated ratios are, and we can again see those blue bars are below the stated ratios. Just again, to size this, if those blue bars were at the top of those yellow bars, it's about a $6 million investment, just to put some, again, magnitude for what this is.
So I want to just kind of inject a little bit of this sort of national perspective, evidence-based practice perspective here. That is targeting instructional attention. What does that actually look like? It means differentiating time and attention to individual students based on unique needs. We want to sort of engage you all in this next section in what this actually means for PPS right now, the range of ways in which schools are seeking to do that. Some are seeking to do sort of within an individual classroom. Is it up to the teachers to figure out how to differentiate their instruction based on the unique needs of the students and provide more attention to some, less to others based on unique needs? Are there things that the school that are happening across classrooms and schools, pushing in additional resources? Maybe in some cases, significantly having much smaller group sizes or doing tutoring, something that sort of is significantly different. Given this system's stated focus on prioritized groups, Black students, Native American students, we would expect to see a robust, differentiated instructional attention strategy that pushed significantly different resources towards those priority students, towards students that are furthest behind. And so that's sort of the inquiry. So you all are making this investment in class sizes. The question then is, what does that mean for our prioritized student groups? What does that mean for students based on their individual needs?
Just a question. One, what does teacher utilization of 75% mean? Does that mean they're teaching 6 of 8? Is that?
That was what we were assuming for high school, yeah.
And then, maybe this is a question for just right there. We're not actually managing class sizes in the high schools. We're managing overall teacher student load. Is that? I mean, it's not how we know to talk about in the budget. We're usually talking about how many students they have, which is
we allocate on a ratio basis at the high school level, and so you are 100% correct that we do not prescribe class size because it comes down to how an individual schedule is built and the decisions that a school-based administrator makes.
It's more of the fact that we have eight periods, and there's a set number of students they can have, which then formulates out to a class size. But it's not like we said, this is what the class size. Unlike.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Great. So we are going to start looking in now. First, we want to look at what school leaders are reporting. So we asked school leaders in their survey about practices, about what's happening within classrooms, what's happening across classrooms. And then we'll dig into some quantitative data around what Jonathan just teed up. So when we ask school leaders about first what's happening within classrooms, what practices are in place to differentiate attention within classrooms, we see that you can see that school leaders are responding generally positively, that they're asking teachers, and teachers are organizing differently within classroom to target attention. So just to help you read this, so the statement here is what we wrote for the school leaders. The percentage is the percent of school leaders that reported in the top 2 responses, so agree or strongly agree. And so what you can see is the majority of school leaders are saying that teachers are rigorously grouping core instructions within their classroom to create differentiated experiences, that school leaders and teachers are using data on a regular basis to organize and change their practice.
How are they able to measure that? Only through a survey?
Yeah. This was through a survey. So this was school leaders responding to us that this is happening.
Anonymous.
So maybe I'm not understanding. So ask teachers how they're doing instead of doing based on the survey.
We ask school leaders.
School leaders how they're doing. They say good. I'm scared. Were we anticipating them to say they? Were we anticipating them to say they weren't doing good?
Well, I think that's a great. I mean, let's keep going then. I think let's keep going. So the other thing we then asked about is about how are school leaders organizing resources across classrooms. And actually, we don't see as many positive responses here, right? So we ask about some of the practices that we think about for targeting attention, whether it's pushing in instructional staff into classrooms, reducing class sizes in high priority areas, providing supplemental courses, providing more time in subjects which students are struggling, or one-on-one tutoring. And actually these percentages are a lot lower. School leaders, majority of school leaders across all of these are saying that these aren't really happening. There's certainly pockets in each of these, but there's not a consistent system-wide answer here.
But I think, Gary, your point is really interesting because we're asking principals, assuming that's school leaders, we're asking principals about the instruction of their teachers, and we know we have varying degrees of sophistication in terms of what principals are looking for. So it's a nuance on this kind of data.
I want to clarify, I don't think they were asking them questions about their teaching staff. They were asking what the student experience was. Right.
Well, they were asking them, like, are teachers using data? I mean, I think that's pretty clear. Some of it is about, you know, what type of instruction is going on in your building.
It says school leaders who receive timely, useful data on school resource use, right?
Yes, that was one question we asked. We asked if teachers are using data.
Which surveys are you talking about? I'm on the site council at a high school. We're surveying faculty, we're surveying parents, and we're surveying students. And are there other surveys that are going on?
This was a survey that the ERS teams put out to school leaders in the district in December. This is a survey that we use, again, nationally, so we have data for other urban districts in these same exact questions.
So, ask the question on this other side. So, asking this school leaders, you know, if they need more time for core instructions, basically saying, yeah, they need more time for core instruction.
We asked, are there practices currently in place in the school that are creating more time for core instruction for students in the subject in which they are struggling? So are you currently putting in place for students more time?
The follow-up question in a survey, like what were the barriers to not being able to say yes to that answer?
We did have an open response area. I don't have off the top of my head something that was jumping out for particularly that.
Let's remember what we're doing here.
Yes.
The question is, what are the ways in which you all are investing in differentiating instructional attention to students who are highest priority, students who need it most? There are two, at the school level, there are two archetypes for making that investment. Within classroom, across classrooms. Within classroom, we got data back from principals, and one can, you know, have a conversation about, do they really know what they were, you know, how accurate are their perceptions? They reported that for the most part, those practices are there within classroom. There's so much juice you can squeeze from that orange, from that whatever thing. The other variable, the other archetype then is, well, what are we doing within our school across classrooms? And the point, the observation that we got from the data is, well, there's a lot of things that we know from effective practice, from research nationally, a lot of strategies that schools might elect to choose. And in fact, they are allocating resources significantly above sort of target class sizes. They are not necessarily universally, like there are individual schools are doing individual things, but there isn't significant investment in differentiating instructional attention through cross-classroom investment. That's what the right side of this shows. And in a world where the priority is specific groups, students who are furthest behind, layering in class sizes incrementally down, and I would say that's something we see nationally all over the country, that doesn't necessarily match the conception of the challenge that we've heard you all articulate. So that's what we're raising here.
I do want to kind of revisit the underlying assumption from one of the earlier slides, which showed that we do a good job of differentiating our resource allocation by school based on student need. You know, we haven't done that for very long. So I'm interested, like Dr. Adams, in your sense of whether or not it's a lagging indicator, you know, that maybe we just haven't seen the fruits of those investments to a large degree, or whether it is supporting what you just hypothesized there, or both. I'm sure it's a combination of both, but I'm not convinced that we have done that long enough to know that it's not getting us the results that we were hoping.
I think there are a lot of inputs that need to go into our schools and our staff in order to get to where we want our student achievement to be beyond having additional people, right? I always said as a building, I'd rather have 2 subs and a highly trained staff than fully staffed, but my staff not be highly trained. Because we could probably make it more effectively in the first situation. But there, you know, I think we have to remember our context. We're in a state that really pushed back against the Common Core standards, which means they push back against the state standards, which might mean that if I'm a teacher or an administrator, I might not currently have a deep and rich understanding of those standards. So even if I am, for example, looking at data on student learning needs, if those data are not at the level, the rigor and grade level appropriate place, then I'm looking at the wrong data and we still won't get the outcomes, right? So looking at the student learning data doesn't by itself get us where we want to with increased achievement unless we're using grade level standards on our material, which is why we went, and we're providing training on data literacy, and we're providing, as the teachers union has asked for, equity-based training so people can unpack their biases and check their belief that all students can and will achieve, things like that. So it's a very complicated web and logic model of what the inputs we're trying to apply so that practices shift, so that student outcomes change.
These are good questions. I'm going to ask that you parking lot for the remainder because we only have technically 5 minutes left because we promised to get you all out of here around 9:30. So I'm going to have Courtney to go ahead and go through the rest. We don't have that many slides left, but there are some important things we want to leave you with.
Thank you all for your conversation. So we are going to look at a couple of quantitative data slides now, looking at some of these practices on this right-hand side, and to understand how that is playing out. So we're going to look at these 2 bullets. We're going to look at class sizes and how that might be playing out for students by race and across subjects. And we're going to look at also these supplemental courses because we see some spotlights that we think are important for folks to see and hear. So the first thing we look at is class size by race to understand how students are experiencing this investment in class size by race. So we see, again, these bars are the different races. This is K5, so you can see on average a Black student experiences a class size in K5 of about 21 students. That's pretty similar across races. And again, you see that's pretty similar across grade levels. And so there are some differentiation, but again, it's not significantly different. And so when we think about differentiation, it's not necessarily showing up in this way, in this class size piece. We can also look, again, to see if there's differentiation in particular subjects. So we look at core and non-core class sizes, and again, we see pretty similar sizes. And so again, to us, this is showing that there's not that differentiation. I want to just put this, again, in perspective to put some concrete examples or numbers on how to think, what does this investment actually mean? What could it mean? And so I'm just going to take that right hand, that green bar. So we see average class size for non-core of 25 right now. What is the investment of having that at 25 as compared to the stated ratio of 28? And I'm actually going to come back to this slide to just show, again, what are the different practices we might think about for targeting attention. It's how does that 3 class size difference, what does that translate to in terms of other practices? And so a couple ways to think about those 3 students in non-core class sizes. In terms of reducing class sizes in high priority areas, so what that could look like is for 9th grade math and ELA, class sizes going from 25 to 15. It's a pretty big difference.
You're saying that's the same amount of resource?
It's the same amount of resource.
3 non-core or 15 for math and English. Okay.
And then what does that mean in terms of tutoring? So that could mean that 25% of high school students are getting 30 hours of tutoring over the course of the year in small groups, in groups of 3. So that's another equivalent. Last, in terms of supplemental courses, what could that mean? That could mean 20% of high school students are getting an additional supplemental course in an area of need to support in smaller groups. So again, I'm not trying to assert that one of these are the better or right or wrong for the district. But I'm just trying to put some concrete numbers about what are the trade-offs and decisions here, and then really thinking about what that means in this context. The last thing on this slide, then, we did want to spotlight a practice around support classes. As we saw in that school leader survey, it seems like there's pockets and school leaders doing different things across those strategies. So one thing we saw is that there are schools using support classes as a way to target additional resources to students who are behind. So this data is looking at across schools, what % of students are enrolled in either what we're calling academic support classes or these core support classes. And we see, again, some places where there are these strategies. So I want to call out, and I'll ask Margaret to jump in, but Jefferson High School as an example, we see 30% of students are enrolled in an academic support class as a way to target attention.
So I think that, we it is about framing too, and what I would say is there's a concerted effort to talk about acceleration in terms of how do we accelerate learning. One of the practices that a theory of action that has been placed at Jefferson is to have freshman classes double blocked in language arts and algebra as a mechanism to accelerate learning so that students can be prepared to access college level coursework by the time they're juniors. So again, this is one of those pieces where you do intentional investment at a grade level that then accelerates learning and gets students prepared to make that transitional step as a junior to then get towards graduation and then post-secondary success. And so you'll see that was a intentional strategy that is slightly different. This is differentiation both within a class in some ways, but then it's also saying that we're going to, it's one of the places on the right column where a school made an intentional investment to accelerate learning through additional access to core instruction in math and language arts.
Margaret, though, doesn't that depend on the student being in the classroom? And I mean, during the COVID and post-COVID periods, you have a large problem of getting students in the classroom. They're walking around the halls.
This is enrollment. This is a true statement. This is an enrollment measure.
I'm going to say we keep.
I'm going to move us. Thank you for hanging in there. We have about three more slides, so we're almost there. This last little section we want to talk about, so we're going to skip this discussion, but the next section we're going to look at is where else we see investments in the district. We want to specifically talk about breadth of course offerings across schools. So just a few seconds of framing. We know breadth of course offerings there's a lot of benefits and important aspects about breadth of course offerings. Provides student choice. It provides engagement. It gets to your point, students in seats and gets them to show up if they're excited about the courses on their schedule. And we also know that there are investment implications for a breadth of course offerings. There's financial implications to have the staff available. There are time implications to have teachers ready to prep and teach those courses. And so what we want to do in this conversation is really tee up what's currently happening in the district and what is the explicit investment that is going towards that. And so we'll start by just looking at small classes. So we'll look at this to start. What is the % of core and non-core class sections with fewer than 18 students across middle and high schools? This is the % by school. And so you can see from the start that there's a pretty large portion of classes in the district that are less than 18 students. Couple things, why 18? There's nothing really particularly special about 18 itself. Could have picked 19, could have picked 17. We picked 18 because this was significantly different from those stated ratios. And so that has the implication that there's probably significantly different student experience for these smaller classes. It's also a significant financial investment to have a class of 18 as opposed to 25. And so we really just use this as a way to size that investment there and these experiences. And again, to put some magnitude to that, the investment for these class sizes less than 18 compared to that mid-range or stated ratio is around $6 million investment.
I'm curious, why aren't all the K-8s on there?
Is there one particular that is?
Well, you're missing part of like Southeast.
We can double check that. Not sure off the top of my head why part of them are missing.
Harrison Park.
Sorry about that.
There's a pretty big group.
Okay, we can double check. Okay, so then the part of the reason we see these small classes is driven by the breadth of course offerings across schools. And so the way we look at this is by thinking about what courses are what we're calling singleton courses versus non-singleton courses. So singleton courses are courses that are only offered have one or two sections throughout the year. So these are the specialized courses that really a subset of students are taking. There's only one or two sections.
Some of those are CTE. Be interesting to know what percentage of those are CTE.
Yep. And what we can see is if we look at those small classes, so those classes that were less than 18, we see, close to half of them across the year are these singleton classes. So a lot of that is going into these singleton courses. If we look at those classes that are above 18, most of those are not singleton. Most of those are courses that are more frequent. And again, just to put some sizing to this, so those singleton courses have a class size average of 13. So again, we think that of a financial investment, that's a big financial investment, and it's about roughly $4 million. So we just laid out financial investment. I want to talk last slide on the time investment. So breadth of course offerings also has an implication for what the teaching job looks like, and it increases the complexity of the teaching job. So what we're looking at here is the number of unique course offerings that are offered at each school. These dots are schools. On the x-axis. And then we're looking at the percent of teachers in those schools with 3 or more preps. And so what preps are here is the number of unique courses that a teacher needs to teach. So if I'm a teacher and I'm teaching 3 sections of English 1, that counts as 1 prep because I only have 1 course that I need to prepare my materials for. If I'm teaching English 1, English 2, and an AP English, that's 3 preps because I have 3 different materials and courses I need to get my arms around and be ready for. And so what you can see is that as schools are offering more unique courses at both the middle and high school, we see there's a higher percent of teachers that are teaching 3 or more preps. And we know, again, that this is increasing their complexity. If teachers are teaching 3 or more preps, they need to use their planning time to really focus on getting these materials ready. They're stretched across more courses. They have less time for focused observation in those courses. They're splitting their PL opportunities across those courses. So we wanted to, again, just name this as an opportunity cost or a trade-off that comes with this investment.
Given that we're now past time, we have a sort of final wrap-up, small group facilitation or discussion we could have. We could also just sort of call this and ask people to reflect on what they've experienced and then loop back to staff with reflections, questions to engage in whatever the next appropriate time would be. But, Board Chair, I'd ask for your direction.
Yeah, and I would sort of look to my colleagues. I'm thinking, from my perspective, I would say let's wrap up and have people again sort of think through some of those questions.
I say keep going. It's not stopping.
I'm not joking.
I do find it fascinating.
And with another 10 minutes, I think would be valuable to wrap up the session. And our consultants could call it a wrap as well.
Gary's asleep, but the rest of you.
I want to be sensitive to staff that's on that board to an hour as well.
Okay. Yeah, how much time would you like?
Some people are not. We're volunteering our time, and some people are actually getting paid for their time. So.
And what's your preference as a volunteer?
So if I'm as a volunteer, I'm volunteering my time. I would like more time since I'm volunteering my time.
Okay. That's gonna keep-
I made this based on the fact that we might be done in 10 minutes and not another 30.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think this kicks me over. Can we sort of, about 10 minutes of material? I mean, you said like
So
facilitation or something.
we're done with material. We have some closing thoughts that we can offer.
Yeah.
But I think that the next thing would be small group reflections on just what we're seeing, ability to do questions in small groups. And then if you all wanted to go around board members and sort of share a couple of closing thoughts, like that was the original plan.
Okay, let's do that.
Can we also, just be clear on what the mechanism for how we put questions in? And like
Your ERS, if you will give it to your ERS person, we're capturing questions that are being asked at your table. So if you'll pass it along, we're capturing it in our Excel spreadsheet, and then we will get that back to Jonathan Garcia and Roberto.
So let's do that for questions you have tonight. Do that. For questions that come up in the next few days, let's send them all through Roseanne. Roseanne? Is that okay? Okay, so questions following today, send to Roseanne and they'll get them in sequence.
Great.
Okay, small groups, you can see the questions.
Do you want to pull up our closing question or just leave?
I think let's do closing.
I think that it really shows the
Yeah. Okay, so if you all will take a look at the closing questions, what did you take away? Or what questions do you have that you want to pass along and kind of share with your group? And then how does this reinforce or counter existing priorities, perceptions of some of the work? And then how can this type of information inform your discussions that you're having, whether it's the budget review committee or the board or the cabinet? How can this information help to inform your work now as well as in the future? As you're thinking about financial sustainability, as you're trying to think about trade-offs, as we're trying to focus on resources. So go ahead and turn to your.
How would the public hear like the different discussions? Like how is that gonna work?
They would, that's why this is a work session.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Great question. All right, go ahead and turn to your groups.
I know, in terms of just obviously like all these are like
Is that in our community?
From my perspective, the small class sizes, particularly at the middle
I think
schools,
it definitely shows
as
like
high schools are more functioning as individual schools. They function not that that was the intentional strategy.
And I think your community
Is it too, a lot of these.
Maybe we proposed a lot.
Some stuff a few months ago.
Early 2000s.
Middle and elementary. And middle and elementary in particular. Like high schools, you are relatively large compared to.
What I'm saying is like, take your recommendations.
Part of the data that is
This seems like a
presented, presentation present to us.
From them, they find information
We are investing in the outputs.
Small 6/8 to 10 years.
You always say that.
Teacher effectiveness and leadership are the top two factors there. And
I'm just like.
From my hiring. So we had all this data. First of all, it takes incredible time. So this came up in the board discussion. So why don't we do this? I think we could have done was those 5 questions. Absolutely. One thing that should be so that's what we gained. I think sure. So I found
So there's a complicated question. But then again, we also know that we have a lot of tiers one on there. And to be honest, I just keep that class, which means
I don't know, like.
spend it not like funding in a school for a long time, or, you know.
Like for me, that's a. Well, that's.
It was like the other way around. I get some clarity of what question.
There were so many. Some people have like 12 kids and 10 kids.
It's very good to hear, but our small elementary school are 6 of the size. Our previous district was in the new elementary schools for 750 students.
Yeah. About a wish list because you could kind of route
Or not.
and then you could let people forecast. Based on the students who can offer W and X and not Y and Z. You know?
What are the educators say, right? Like, what we should say, right? How much. And then like.
How does that apply into his?
It seems like and they were
Right. That's the only reason we have that. Has that interest. You know, really? Where is that?
It's harder to research when you have those students who almost passed, and you can make some of those things happen within existing staff. That gets a lot harder the smaller the school.
Yeah. Right. So, right.
So in some ways,
Well, yeah.
and I think what's interesting to see like what share because like they get invested in some of these things that
And you can, you know, find 25 kids, and they might be coming from 5 different, or taking, you know, like, I don't know, I can't even think of an example. But you know, that was, I think, sometimes.
One thing I worry about. I've been in class.
Right. Your classes and where you are too.
So that leads me back to my
Pushing. So that's where it's
And also take, you know, like the platform and stuff.
And also I think that, I mean,
that's where that is.
Like make it to a
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, and see, that's out of it. See, so we have a saying.
third year Arabic. Yeah, and you have to go to Florida State.
That's a professional. That's not it. It's not even the split teacher. That's where something. I don't know. I don't get this out. My players, so this whole overall, it's not just how much you spend, it's about how you spend. So there's a lot of different services.
Well, I mean, I wasn't trying to play double death there and saying that, you know, I think we need to double down on our current program and not so that's like makes perfect sense. I was just saying, I don't think we can say that it has an effect. That's a little too simplistic.
Connections like
I'll tell you, it's your favorite day. Getting to a foot, getting better, investing more. Should sit in on some.
Also, how do you know when resources social health relative to direct academic intervention? Maybe, you know, I mean, I was talking to a teacher today who basically said that.
So I guess what I'm saying is, you can see.
The rate of barriers, kids have so many other
You look at their when
she not
so we have to
way more
make sure it's
They still have us on the
Their idea for
they're still just like we can give one just
exactly, you're not making it like the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about
I know.
And fun.
Oh, right. We understand that math is a part of our academic program.
Okay.
A lot of us.
So just a piece of PPS work, right? It's
Collaboration.
Are they?
Not much. Yeah.
Because that was my understanding that or finance. Yeah. All are all.
Okay, I'm gonna have you you guys to wrap up your conversations in 60 seconds.
I think Trinity's some big great examples. I got the cheese open. And she's talking about some practices that I noticed that she has taken deep dives into the curriculum herself and talks to her teachers about it. Like, oh, so you're in this year. Like, tell me how you're doing. And she's having those kind of conversations with her teachers all the time. And that makes a difference in teachers, and the teacher paying attention to the material.
We've done videos where we've videotaped. So here's an example of a principal teacher conversation and how and showing it, and people are like, oh, that, no, I'm not, like that's what I do. So I'm thinking, which is really so helpful to see.
Go ahead. Everybody in front of the room so we can wrap this conversation up.
All right.
I know we appreciate your commentary. I think we captured a lot of it, but we want to bring our attention to the board chair.
All right. What I'm going to do really quickly as we sort of just wrap this up, first of all, thank you. And we'll do a little bit of those in a second. This was fascinating. I want, if y'all are open, I would love for board members at each table to just give a 30-second, I really mean that 30 seconds. The timer's going to go off. We're going to ask you to wrap up your comments. 30-second just sort of thoughts. And it could be about what you just heard in the small group. It could be a larger observation. And then we'll do a quick wrap up. Who wants to go first? Ailey, because you loved it. Go ahead.
Made eye contact. We had a really interesting conversation here at the end, and I was really fascinated by the whole concept of the instructional attention, and especially as we think about our middle school redesign and some of the things we talked about, like student engagement, student mental health, and the high value on those electives. Like, it really, I've never thought about what's the cost of that, and so to look at like what really are the most effective practices to engage middle schoolers, not just what I think is actually there or is my narrative, but to examine like what does this actually cost if we continue in this model, and is it really benefiting kids when we're looking at our board goal of high school readiness. And so what are we talked about trade-offs of what we see with our kiddos in middle school is a lot of like deregulation, peer group stuff, and that is really important. Okay, done. You pointed your watch, so I'm gonna talk.
I know, that's exactly what I did. Thank you for following direction. Herman, you want to go next? Man, Herman can't even do this. You might as well not even.
We had some great conversation.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Amy?
I missed that. I'm losing it. Margaret might be able to say what I said. But to Ailey's point, we talked about the cost benefit of, okay, you see the efficiencies that could come from not having so many singleton classes, but then you have to get into the really nuanced conversations about what keeps kids engaged and how many of those singleton classes are part of our CTE pathways or but then we thought, well, coming out of the pandemic, how could we be more creative about using technology and maybe taking some of those and having kids be able to be kids who come from different high schools, be able to take these higher level classes together, find your economies of scale outside of the walls of a building.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, we found the data really fascinating here, really interesting. Our student rep had questions about the instructional, my words.
Because it's 10 p.m.
Attention, thank you. And I thought it was, I loved this presentation. Also, my big questions are around how do we, knowing what we know now, how do we solve for the outcomes, the disparate outcomes we see, and really where can we, especially as we're going into budget discussion, where can we place our attention, our budget? That'll solve for the outcomes, the disparate outcomes.
Yeah. Great. Gary?
I guess for me, it's just, we do a lot of talking, so now I'm ready to start doing stuff. I asked the superintendent, hey, so my thing is going to be to the district. What have you guys learned out of this presentation from the last one and this one, as far as how we move and change moving forward?
Okay. like Herman, Julia is going to pass. So I'll just wrap up. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Byrony.
Technically sort of unofficial, but.
Well, I was thinking table by table. Yes, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say that it was interesting to see, I hadn't really thought of a lot of these issues in this way, and it was interesting to see how I really profoundly felt a lot of the comments made by this data really aligned with my experience as a student. Someone who goes to school every day, takes 8 classes, and how it really did, like, especially around like instructional, whatever it's called. Attention. And specifically how when teachers have a lot of classes, like I really noticed that as a student who takes French, and my French teacher teaches 4 grades. Grade levels of French. And then also, sorry, I know I'm probably going over the 30-minute mark here, but I also thought it was
Seconds, 30 seconds.
Sorry. I also just want to highlight something that Amy was talking about, which is that we change like our rhetoric and our practices like a lot, and sometimes it becomes really tricky to sort of be able to tell how successful something is if you only kind of have a year worth of the program to measure that on. And so I think certainly for the board, since I'm gonna be gone next year, that's turnover with the board, but that we really focus on trying to maintain some longevity, even if there is conflict from maybe, you know, our partners or from our community, because at some point, like it is the job of this board to maintain some sort of standard so that we can figure out what best practices are. And I think there is data that is supporting every like option you can do, or like every single methodology on the planet. And I think that we kind of need to pick something as a board and just stick with it for a while and see if it works.
I want to thank ERS. I thought the presentation tonight was really great. I thought we got a lot of really ERS. Didn't I say that? Yeah, okay,
Yes.
good. I got it right. And we got some great presentations, some great data. I want to thank the CBRC members. Thank you for hanging out tonight. This is a long night and lots of really good questions and input. I'll just say from my table, we had a really good conversation at the end, kind of similar to what it sounds like from other tables, is where do we go with this, right? So what happens and how do we involve other stakeholders in the conversation, and you know, and what are the action items coming out of this, right? To make sure we start seeing some change. And I also will just say personally, I love the way the data was presented to sort of say, you know, here's what's happening, and here's the cost of doing that. And we're not even saying that's right or wrong, right? It's just now you can sort of know, oh, well, if we did it differently, we could put those resources somewhere else, which may or may not be the right decision, but I think it's going to further and help a lot of our budget conversations. So with that, I'm going to wrap us up. It's 10 p.m. For some East Coast people, it's 1 a.m. So thank you very much, everybody. We are adjourned.